I'm Nick Von Walkerbarth, and you're listening to the Von Dubcast. If you don't want to listen to me gap in the intro and you want to skip right to the interview, skip about 15 minutes. But before you do, please consider doing one of these couple things that really helps out the show. Following the social medias for the Von Dubcast, subscribing, and leaving a review. If you could do those things, that'd be awesome. Also, give me a subscription on the YouTube channel. That'd be great too. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 105 of the Von Dubcast. Really big episode here. Because it's a fighter, and you guys have heard me talk ad nauseum about just how much I enjoy the sport of MMA and how much respect and admiration I have for those men and women that are willing to dedicate their lives to it and to undergo all the fear and all the angst that goes with stepping inside that cage and putting yourself on the line and pushing your body to that limit. So it always means a lot to me to have somebody that has stepped into some sort of ring or octagon in some sort of combat sport. That always means something to me. But as well as that is our guest today, Randy, who is has had over 10 professional fights and has been teaching me private Jiu Jitsu lessons over at Champion Gym and GP here, and as well has been helping me kind of with my own little, diet martial arts journey that I'm on here of just, getting into jiu-jitsu. He's been doing the private classes with me, but not only that, but he's also been, helping transition me into the class lessons and introducing me to people. And I feel like just to say he's the guy that's been teaching me private jiu-jitsu lessons doesn't do justice to just everything that Randy's brought to my life. And I'm very thankful for it. And I hope that this little interview conversation here can be, my small way of paying him back. Hopefully he gets something out of it. Maybe people hear about him, want to book in some classes with him or whatever have you, whatever comes of it. I hope that he gets something out of this because I got a lot out of it. So that's A, of why I'm excited for this episode. But B, and probably what I'll jump right into, is we have our first motherfucking sponsorship. Let's go. I'm giving myself a little, round of applause here, pats on the back. Been working on quite a few different ideas for sponsorship for the podcast over these last couple of weeks, and it's a bit of a different dynamic. I have so much pride in this podcast that it's hard for me to go after these sponsorships. You kind of got to really take your ego out of it and go into these conversations with really trying to highlight what you're going to bring to them. And it's been kind of an interesting journey. I'm learning a lot along the way, but one of the ones when I first, decided to go down this road of starting a podcast all those months and years ago, sponsorship was always kind of one of those things where I was thinking ahead of, it'd be cool to get this sponsorship or that sponsorship. And my favorite podcast, I always love podcasts that really take care with their sponsors and only bring people on that they really care about and stand behind and really believe in the product and want to sell. I always really enjoy that in my podcasts. And that got me thinking, who would those companies be? Who do you use all the time? Like what products would you really want to sell? And one of the first ones that came to mind was Freshie. And Freshie's a restaurant, it can be found in the same places as all those fast food places, but it's anything but. It's fresh food, it's salads, it's bowls, it's wraps, it's amazing food. And what I really love about it is that, me personally, I'll just maybe tell my personal story of specifically why I love it. And then I'll get into why I think you should love it too. Freshie for me was probably 6 months into moving to Grand Prairie. Didn't really know many people, didn't have many places to go and didn't really have much for routine. And, I'd pack my lunch every couple times. I, go to your Subways and your A&Ws and all that stuff. But it was really tough, especially at the start, because I was so busy when I first moved to Grand Prairie and was doing that job and just kind of getting my feet wet. I really didn't know what was going on. Didn't know shit from Shinola at that point, and still don't. But that's besides the point. But when I just popped in at this little place called Freshie, I'd never heard of, never gone in there. Just had kind of a nice art design and sounded like they had some healthy food, and I was looking to get a healthy alternative, and just went in there. And the first thing that stopped me was just the people. They were really polite and really were willing to sit there and help you count calories and compare different things and what's in this, and we can substitute that out. It really, made me feel at home right when I went in there. And what I loved about it was how delicious it was to eat, healthy food. I'm eating broccoli and stuff that usually it takes an army to get it in my mouth. And I'm really enjoying it. And what I found was, if I can schedule in with my self-control issues, I really have to, play mind games and work around myself to make sure that I'm living somewhat of a healthy lifestyle. Calling myself healthy in any way is a really big stretch because I'm kind of a caveman and I don't do all the things I know I should, but I try and game the system a little bit. So I do that in a couple ways. I try to do time restricted eating where I only eat, within a certain amount of hours in the day. And that really helps. But even doing just that alone, that whatever those couple hours end up being in a day that I eat, the amount and the type of things I eat are really, really, non-optimal, we'll call it. And what I started finding was that if I can wait till 2 or 3 in the afternoon, don't eat anything all day, just fast until that, and then go and get my first meal of the day at Freshie, regardless of what I'm getting some vegetables, I'm getting some healthy things in there, and it really kicks my whole day off. And then I'm full because this is an amazing full meal of healthy food. And that lasts me all the way into the night, pretty much until dinner. Right. And just that change really helped give me some structure in my life and give me, something to work around so that I at least, if, sometimes I'm really on my diet and I'm great, top to bottom, but I'm going to say the majority of the time I'm really not. And that is that stopgap that helps me. I know at least in a day, I'm not going to be, doing damage to myself, eating from sun up to sundown. And the fact that I get my one Freshie meal a day, that I know is going to be healthy. I know I'm going to be getting, a little bit of, good vitamins and mix like that. Oh, as well as I try and drink my Athletic Greens drink, which is another, sponsor. I'm working on getting them on the podcast too, to start selling theirs because that's a product I use every day. But that's kind of my routine. And that's what I use, as well as my, daily exercise that I try my best to stick to. That's kind of what those are the things that keep me from being 300 pounds, if I put it in a really crude sense. And, having that and then growing that relationship, it's been amazing. I love the staff there. They always treat me really, really, really well when I go into the Freshie here in Grand Prairie. And I'm so glad that they have come on board to sponsor this podcast, because I just really believe in their product, and I'm there literally every single day I'm in Grand Prairie. I get at least one meal, sometimes multiple meals a day at Freshie, and it just couldn't be a better fit for something that I really believe in. And I'm not just sitting here bullshitting to you, trying to get you guys to sell product. I wouldn't tell anyone different whether they're a sponsor or not. If you're coming up through Grand Prairie and you want somewhat of a healthy meal, honestly, like, even framing it in the terms of just healthy is almost ridiculous to me, just because of how tasty it is. I love that place. I love every bowl. I love every every wrap they make, every soup. It's just top to bottom delicious, and they really put the care in. Like I said, it might look like a fast food place, but it's anything but. It is fresh food, and the care they take to make sure that each and every ingredient is brought in on a fresh timetable, and the amount of care they put into it. I think specifically to this Freshie that I'm talking about in Grand Prairie here, the one that's come on board with us, and this is just the start. I'm hoping to expand it out and maybe get into some other Freshie stores right now. Currently, it's just going to be in Grand Prairie here, so please stop by there. Mention that you heard about it on the Von Dubcast. They might give you a little deal, might give you just a little extra smile, whatever it is. We're still working on it. This is still the early beginnings of this relationship, but to be honest with you guys, this relationship goes far, far further back than them coming on the podcast. And whether they were sponsoring it or not, I couldn't recommend anything higher than what they bring to the table there. So I'm super excited. I hope that was a good 5-minute rant on why you guys should check them out too. But I think that's exciting for me, because this is kind of what I want to show to people is, if you come on to sponsor the show, you're not getting maybe after if you come on and you've advertised for a couple of years and people have heard the spiel every week, it might cut down. But when you're first coming on, I want to talk about your product. I don't want to squeeze it into 30 seconds to just do the contractual obligation to get it off. I care about these products, and I care about my podcast as a product and as a vessel to bring these things to you. So this is just really exciting for me, because this is my first opportunity to show not only the listeners a great thing that they can take part of too, but also anybody that's maybe on the fence about sponsoring in a little bit of a new way. That I know podcasts are a little bit scary for some of these more established companies that have, they're used to advertising on the radio, and they're used to advertising, maybe in the papers, and kind of in these old school ways is a bit different. But I think it's different for a reason. I think it's a good different. And I think this is going to really show what people will get if they come on board with the Von Dubcast and want to advertise a product. So yeah, that's that's probably longer than it needed to be on it, but I'm just so excited to have them come on board that I probably could talk another 10-15 minutes just on all the amazing things. I could have told you guys all my custom orders that I get there, all my favorites. Anyway, we'll save that for next week. So yeah, a great episode with Randy. We talked a lot about his fight career, a lot about just MMA in general, kind of where it's going, what goes into it. Some of the young and up and coming fighters that are in Grand Prairie right now that Randy's been able to kind of mold that transition of going from a fighter more to a coach. A lot of those things, and just kind of the amazingly lucky time that we live in as fight fans, with just everything going on in modern day MMA, the amazing storylines and fights that are getting put together. It's Sunday that I'm recording this before the episode goes live on Monday, and those fights on Saturday, guys, was just incredible. Was supposed to be up in Edmonton this week, and kind of plans changed last minute. I was kind of disappointed. I was like, I'll have to watch the fights by myself. But then, last minute, my best buddy Chase, he decided to, hop in the truck after his shift ended on Friday, drive all the way down to GP, and we had just a weekend. We watched fights all day Saturday, watched the Oilers game Saturday night, ordered bad food, had a couple drinks, just got into some really silly shit that we always get into, of just, when me and that goofball get together, it's just laughs nonstop. And just what a weekend it was of just, we didn't really go and do anything. We didn't even leave the house, but we just had such a fun weekend of it. And it was so exactly what I needed. And it went from kind of being disappointed and thought this weekend was going to be kind of a bit of a bummer, into one of the best weekends I've had in a long time. So just that's my little update on what I've been through this weekend. I love those fights, top to bottom. I'm hoping to have maybe someone with a little bit of expertise in the MMA world to come on this week and maybe break down this upcoming card, because there's another one, back-to-back weekends of just stacked cards, UFC 267 this weekend and 268 next weekend. So I'm hoping to have someone on maybe this week to speak to the card upcoming and kind of break down what we see of it, and maybe do a little bit of a recap of those amazing fights. I could recap it right now, but honestly wouldn't have enough time in this little intro to go through all the storylines that happened this weekend, and just what amazing fights that were started right early. 8:30 a.m. Me and Chase were up late Friday night and just set our alarms. Both were, in our underwear on the couch with our blankets, watching the fights right there at 8:30. But it was a great day. The fights only got better and better. The storylines kept getting better and better. And just, we're throwing some live bets. I'm not a real gambler, mostly out of laziness. I'd probably gamble a lot if it was, if I wasn't so lazy. But, just trying to throw bets out to Chase to try and hit and throw a little bit of excitement on him. Wasn't too good. He probably shouldn't have listened to me. He was trying to bet the opposite of what I was telling him. It was lots of fun. So yeah, great fights coming up. Great little conversation around the MMA world. This is perfect prep for kind of the heavy, all the way till the new year. There's really, really great cards coming in. If you're a newer fan of the sport, if you're just kind of dipping your toes in it, you hear it here. There's no better time to get in there. There's no better conversations to help give you a smooth entryway in, because we talk a lot more about the life around fighting and kind of all those other things it brings. And I think that's what really sucked me into the sport. More than the actual fighting itself, was everything that goes around it. And I think conversations like this is how I got pulled into that and what opened my eyes to it. And I'm hoping that people can see a little bit more that goes into fighting than just the 15 or 25 minutes they see in the cage. And I think that's what's really special about the sport. And I'm hoping that more conversations like this bring more fans like me that, love the sport top to bottom, from the time they're in the cage to the time they're out. Yeah. Other than that, if you guys could do me the favors of, now that I have a sponsor, go, if you're in Grand Prairie, please stop by Freshie. Please tell them you heard about them on the podcast. That would mean a lot to me. Other than that, same old things of subscribing to the podcast on wherever you listen to. Follow the social medias. That really helps. And just tell somebody. Word of mouth is how these things spread. If you could tell somebody about these episodes, if you know someone that loves MMA, for instance, in this for this episode, pass it on to them. If you heard maybe the episode on dementia, maybe you have someone that fits for some of the nursing episodes, some of the episodes talking about my days in Lister at the residence. Maybe a 17 or 18-year-old kid that is about to go to Lister and they want a little bit of prep. There's a couple episodes you could pass them that way. Just if you do, you do. If you don't, you don't. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just happy you're here listening, and I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you guys in the outro. All right. Bye. All right. Thank you for being here, Andy.
No problem.
Not too bad of a morning. Little private jiu-jitsu lesson with some idiot this morning, then hop on the mics and talk a little bullshit.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't get too much better than that. Just thought I'd start off with a big thank you. I've been just enjoying these jiu-jitsu lessons like nothing else. I'm just obsessed with it. It's a really fun sport. It's something I always knew that I had a passion for it because it seemed interesting to me, but you never know how much that's going to translate to actually doing it. Watching and doing are two different things. And I was a little bit turned off with my first experience when I first went there. I just didn't, I don't know what it was. I just couldn't break through that, whatever that barrier was in the first 3 classes. I was kind of a little bit disheartened, but I still had a real passion. I felt like I still didn't give it a good try, a good college try. So then coming in this year, once, a couple things sorted, pandemic, got into a little bit better spot, I thought I'm going to give this another try. And I went to Shane at the gym there and said, who can you hook me up with to do some private lessons just to get my feet under me? He said, I got just the guy, and he put me in touch with him. Me and you hit it off right from the start. How long have you been teaching jiu-jitsu?
So jiu-jitsu itself, out of all my martial arts that I know, it's actually the newest of all of them.
Yeah.
I started training it in late 2011. I didn't really start teaching truly jiu-jitsu itself till probably early 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one of your newer ones. So what was your first martial art? What'd you get in it? How'd you get started? Maybe we'll back it all the way to that.
So yeah, to back up, myself 37 now, so I'm getting pretty old in that sense as a fighter. But back in 1989, I started boxing. Yeah, and then the local boxing club here in town shut down just because I think there was some politics that happened.
Always is.
And whatnot, where they just weren't allowing amateur events to happen and stuff like that. I think really we lost our combative sports commissions, what it was.
Yeah.
So the local gym, there's no real reason to have it anymore. So it shut down. So we lost boxing here for, probably 8-9 years, I'd say.
Really?
Yeah.
In a place ground pretty size, hey? Because like even growing up in Slave Lake, we had it wasn't a big boxing club, but a small boxing club, but it was one guy that kind of ran it and took the reins with it. So I guess if you lose that, you got nothing in your community.
Yeah, and that was the same thing here. Hockey was so big still. I think it is still big here, but it was really big when I was a kid. So that was kind of the main focus with everybody. So sports like that didn't happen. Even local karate, taekwondo clubs, those were very few and far between, where now there seem to be more frequent in town. Right.
So when that boxing club closed down, did you find anything to supplement? Was there any, did you hop in any taekwondo classes, or did you still have the bug, or just you waited out till something else popped up?
No, one of the other things that happened at the same time of when the club closed was my biological parents split up. So my mom took the opportunity to pull me away from anything violent. She didn't like it, especially when me and my little brother were fighting all the time too. Yeah. So she just pulled it away, figuring that would be the smartest thing to do.
Yeah. And how old were you at that point?
So I was 6. Yeah, 6, about 7 type deal. So she pulled me out. So I didn't have tons of real experience actually doing boxing, being such a kid, but I was hooked.
Yeah.
So I was always watching, especially Mike Tyson back then, Lennox Lewis early on in his career, Holyfield, stuff like that. I really loved the heavyweights. Like everybody else, of course. Yeah. More a fan, truly at the time, not a student quite so much like I am today. Yeah. And then I was late 93, I think it was November 93, UFC 1 came out, and I happened to be over at my uncle's place, and he had one of the old satellite dishes that when you change the channel, you watch a satellite dish move around.
Yeah.
And he was just like, hey, just don't let your mom and dad know that we were watching this. Yeah. And him and his friends were there, and I happened to watch it, and I saw little Hoist Gracie pull it off, and I was hooked from there with wrestling. So from there, me and friends, we started calling them tap-out matches, and that's how we just decided all of our disputes and stuff like that, or who was going to get their way. It was, all right, we're just going to go, no hitting, but just straight grappling till somebody taps out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it started.
I think that's how everybody starts, really. I mean, that
pretty
was
much.
And being a little bit younger, that was kind of the thing. Like when UFC 1 came out in 93, I was born in 93, right? So I was just, missed the wave, but it was kind of funny to watch it just, because my parents too hated all the violent stuff, but I loved it when I was a kid, but we could only, catch it exactly the same thing when nobody's watching. You can kind of put it on. That was when it went on normal TV there for a bit, when they got whatever their first deal was. It was such a big deal because all the people that were, Spike TV, man, that was huge because all these kind of underground fans, or the fans where, somebody in their life wasn't letting you watch it. You can kind of get a little bit more under the radar there. And, So boxing was kind of the first love, and you're watching it then. Do you still watch a lot of boxing?
Not near as much anymore.
Did you watch the Tyson Fury fight the other day?
I did. But now I will admit I didn't pay for it.
Fair
Plus,
enough.
I'm a fairly busy guy too myself. My days usually don't get done till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, especially with kids and all the teaching and training that I do. So I caught it actually on YouTube afterwards, and I watched it, and I sat there and just focused on it and saw some things because, like I said, I'm a student of the game too, and I believe that fight should have ended in round 8, not in round 11.
I couldn't believe the heart that Wilder showed from honestly like round 4 or 5 on. I got like round 7. Yeah. Like I was like, how is this guy? Like I was just waiting for it's such a telling thing. And I think it's different with boxing than maybe MMA because you don't get to see as pure examples of this just from the rule set. But there's certain times in fights, UFC, boxing, whatever, where you can tell a guy has such a small percentage chance of winning, and there's so many ways out in MMA, right? Tap to strikes, give your neck up. You can see it, right? And you can see guys get put into that moment where it's on them. I can either go out on my shield or I can take an easy way out.
The easy way out.
And there was rounds and rounds where that was so on the table for Deontay Wilder, and he never took that easy way out. And I love that fight. I was hoping that you'd seen that fight because that fight was just so incredible. As a newer fan of boxing, I'm completely back-ended into this. I fell in love with MMA and then went back and I'm now, I don't know if you watch Joe Vincent, I think his name is. He does all these YouTube documentaries on like fighters and stuff, and it's just him patched together, and he takes like Joe Rogan from his podcast and like puts that in for audio and stuff, and they're incredible. But he's got them all on Lennox Lewis, Manny Pacquiao, you know, all these. So I've just the last probably 4 or 5 weeks, I've just gone back and just been a student of the game like that and just watched all these careers of these Hagler and Hearns and all these guys, Duran, right? I've watched all these little, 30, 40-minute documentaries on YouTube of these incredible guys in build up for this fight because I really fall in love with boxing. But man, is it an interest? It's so different. And like, you'd think you'd have me being such a fan of a combat sport like MMA, I would have a lot of knowledge going. It is so different completely. And that's what's fun to watch, what you pick up these things. It's like watching a new sport, right? You're picking it up all new and all these little things. But what an incredible, incredible fight that was. And the only thing that could have made it better was I was just a little bit disappointed in Deontay after not, after 3 wars like that, you think there'd be a little bit more camaraderie, and that bad blood was still there. And I think a couple days later he came out and he gave the props and stuff. But I was thinking that was the only thing that could have made that night better. That was just such a perfect historical night, like, and just all went down the heart, knockdowns on both sides, multiple knockdowns. Like, I don't know. I don't think there's, for my money, like I've never seen a fight like that in my life. Like, and I'm an MMA guy, man. That
was a good fight. I expected it to be a good fight.
Yeah.
Like, the first 2 were really good fights. So how could the third one not be?
Right.
But I did not expect it to be of like the
El Clasico.
Like the Mickey Ward and Gotti type of fights. And that's what that was for the heavyweights. It was rock 'em, sock 'em. Because I think the nice part is Tyson this time around, when he came out, the first 2 fights, he boxed. He boxed Deontay. And I think part of him coming in heavy was he wasn't planning on just boxing. He was trying, like Deontay said, he was going to rough me up. He's going to bully me. And if you watched in that fight, Tyson was always putting pressure on. There was always a pressure. Even when he would roll underneath shots and slip out on the angle, he would never slip out far enough that he wasn't in range to throw his own punches. Right. So there was always that pressure on Deontay.
Because his fundamentals are so good, right? And that's what Deontay almost, and again, fully admitting I am not a full-on boxing fan. I don't know a lot, but from what I've seen is like, it seems like, and the boxer I've watched the most is Deontay Wilder. He's the guy that made me fall in love with boxing a couple of years back, and I never missed a Deontay Wilder fight. I can't remember the first one I saw, but anyway, just anybody that has seen Deontay Wilder will know exactly what hooked me, right? And but watching it seemed like he wants to create enough chaos where your fundamentals break down for just that second where he can slip that punch through, right? And then it changes the whole game, because then after you eat one of those, Wilder bombs, your game plan's not going to be the same as it was before. Your mental acuity is not where it was 10 seconds before you took that shot, and that's what it depends on. But Tyson Fury is so big, first of all, to handle those types of shots and not get a scrambled. Clearly, we saw he got knocked down a couple times, right? Even him, he's not immortal, but his fundamentals are so good and so crisp. And like you're saying, he's never out of position. He can always throw these shots. The constant pressure that it was, it almost reminds me of like what you're showing with these jiu-jitsu lessons of just the constant pressure and the constant flowing of never allowing separation. This attack isn't even trying to finish. This is just to lead you to open up for this thing and this thing. And that's what you see with boxing. He's almost putting that same jiu-jitsu pressure on, but in a boxing ring sometimes, which it's almost imperceptible to the untrained eye because you don't see the pressure. But when you see almost that thought, and this is interesting to me because with Israel Adesanya's rise to whatever the heights that he's achieved now, one of the most interesting things is watching how him and Eugene Behrman use feints to overload guys' minds, right? And all that stuff. And they're always putting them in danger, always throwing feints, so they're always breathing and stuff. And it really changed the concept of my understanding of fighting in the stand-up of like, when you're in danger, right? When you have a style who's in and out a lot, like maybe, like Dominic Cruz, TG, lots of movement where it's still, I would still call that a very heavy pressure style, but there's moments in it where there isn't pressure, where you're backing up and he's doing all his arm stuff and stuff, trying to still overloading you, but you're not really in that much danger. You're preparing for danger. Whereas Tyson Fury, his footwork's so good. He's always right there. You are in danger 90% of the time you're in that ring. There's very little times where you're out. It's almost, when the ref's splitting them up until they re-engage, it's the only moments of down. But that is a pace that just any man would crumble under, right? And it shows the strength and the will of Deontay Wilder to stand in that fire for, what did that finish in the 11th?
Yeah, early 11th.
And he was on, and his legs were gone from under him in the
round
6th.
Round 4, I think. If you watch, he actually is bleeding from the eardrum. It's not from the ear, but from the actual eardrum, and that's when his legs start to go. Because at that point, your equilibrium's gone. Yeah,
and you could see his legs were just spaghetti under him the whole time. But just that power and more than anything, more than the power was his will that he showed, right? Which was what made it so classic too, is because there was a lot of questions that already been going into a third fight of a trilogy. A lot of questions already answered, right? The first fight was kind of they're feeling out. They didn't know each other, right? The second fight, Fury clearly learned something. He doesn't box as good of his back foot. I'm going to come forward, and it was a little bit. And then we came in so we had a lot of questions answered, but we didn't know what the response was. I love seeing Deontay Wilder come out and go to the body like that in the first round. That was so interesting to me. Hey, dog, enough. Oh, you just want to give all the love and say.
And that was smart of Wilder, and I think that was a mistake though, is he went away from that.
Yeah.
And he should have. But the thing is he may have exposed something for the next fight for Tyson, maybe. And that's not a guy that you want to let inside you to box either. It could be a boring fight because this is two great boxers, and two great boxers fighting each other won't make for a great fight, but there's now an avenue to possibly at least get in on Tyson and cause him issues.
And I was thinking that too. But I wonder how much of that is the style that Tyson Fury came out with against a guy like Deontay, where he's trying to, because that one right hand is what that's what you're watching. So he's almost putting himself in style where his belly is almost his protection, where he's keeping his hands up, and it was so open. And I was thinking that too. I wonder what that does for the future. But honestly, if Tyson Fury can stand in there for a full round of just taking 1-2s to the belly from a guy like Wilder, who can touch him, right? Like I was thinking that too, but as soon as he didn't crumble, because I was thinking, because in MMA, this is one of the first things I learned when I was first coming in as a fan was, body kicks, body shots, and leg kicks, that term money in the bank, right? Yep. It's going to be good for later in the fight, right? The leg kicks, because that's where you put your power off of, right? You're taking so much sting off of every consecutive shot. With every leg kick you land, you're taking, depending on how hard you kick, 0.25%, 0.5% off their power coming back, because now they can't plant, right? Same with the body. It's more cardio, right? You're eating to that. But some guys just seems like they can train themselves where it doesn't even affect them. And my thought was, I'm curious these next couple of rounds to see if this slows down Tyson Fury, right? But clearly we saw him in the 11th round. Those body shots that he ate in the first, it wasn't quite the money in the bank I thought it would be, especially with a guy like Tyson or Deontay Wilder punched him, right? Because I would not want to get body shotted by Deontay, I guess. But also here's the other thing, and maybe you'd be able to answer this for me better, is there were a lot of straight shots at the guy, and it seems like, to me, again, I know shit all about this, but it seems like it's a lot of the hooks to the body that really dig, and maybe because of the way it came in, you're seeing it more, it doesn't hurt the belly as much. I'm not sure.
That's a tough question because everybody's got their own ideologies and theories on it. Me, I really believe in the breathing side of it. And if you can time, when you hear, like, especially with boxers, you'll hear that in the fight, that kickboxers too, even here in MMA guys. If they're using that defensively also, because when you throw that shot for that split second, when you time that breath, when you throw, it adds a little extra. It's like NOS in the engine type deal, a little NOS in the power. It gives you a little extra pop. What it also does is when you feel your diaphragm and your core and all that, and you make that sound, like I always tell when I'm teaching it, I say, almost pretend like you're playing a wind instrument from back in school, like trumpet, trombone, something, or you're breathing deep. You got to bring it from deep down. And you make that breath and you make it really short and sharp. And if you can time that just right, everything tightens right up in your core. You almost become invincible for that millisecond if you can time it just right. Yeah, like I truly believe, like over my career, I've taken some pretty big kicks in the core, and I've had people be like, oh my God, like, did you feel? Like, no, I didn't feel it at all, because it's like time the breathing. The only spot I find where it doesn't matter if you time that breathing or not, if they catch it just right, it's that liver. And there's nothing you can do about that one. But anywhere else, I think the breathing's the big one. Like even myself in sparring, I think a lot of teammates would contest to it too. I've only been dropped with body shots a couple times in a decade plus that I've been doing this. And I spar on a regular basis with Alex Martinez. And there's some days me and him will give each other the nod and we'll go after each other. Of course, we're light to the head, but we will go after the body and trying to put each other down. And usually I'm on the receiving end of it. But neither of us will usually go down. There's been a few times over the years, yes, but it's that breathing. I really think if a guy can see it and they can time that breath right, you can, and which kind of plays into where you're saying straight shots to the hooks too.
And that's what I was thinking too.
See them a little better,
and they were pretty telegraphed too, right? The thing is Fury didn't really have a real answer to them because of they're both like almost 7 feet tall. There's so much length coming that, like when he from where he was
5 to 83 in reach.
That is wild. That's crazy reach. And because of that, but exactly what you're saying, like be able to breathe and the time for it it seems like by the time is coming, there wasn't much Tyson Fury could do to block or evade, but at least he was seeing them coming and you're stressed and you're tensing up, right? Like I think that's definitely goes to the body, but guys always talk about, this is something I've seen more of, like with knockouts. 90% of the time, it's not the hardest punch in the fight that knocks you out. It's the one that you don't see coming, because your body, it's a much different reaction to getting hit with something you don't see, and your body can't tense for it and go through all the physical processes that probably we understand a bit, but we probably don't even understand a lot of them that have been built in us from thousands of years of evolution of how we take a hit, right? And your body can naturally do that, but only if you see it. And I think that's probably the same with body punches, and that's maybe the biggest difference between the hooks to the body versus a big straight from outside, is if you're in the clinch and you're boxing, your mind's elsewhere, and that's the hook slips underneath into the ribs underneath, and you don't get that ability to time the breath. It's a very different shot than
I agree. And also to add to that too, I think conditioning helps too,
for sure.
Having that conditioning, and what people don't realize, Tyson did have extra weight. He might not have looked like he was in the best of shape, but I'll bet anything under that little bit of extra layer of weight he had, though, adds up barrel. Like when you look at pre-mental health issue Tyson, the man was in pretty good shape. Like he wasn't crazy. Now, granted, he did get fairly overweight and has the extra. He was like 350 pounds, right? So now he's not going to look the same as what he did prior to. But even still, like the first Wilder fight when he came back, he was looking good. But I think he did the smart thing, added the extra weight to take and be able to absorb the shots,
and took a couple fights before he fought Wilder too. He fought. Who did he fight? He got that cut. He got that bad cut on the top, and he had to kind of. But that was one of those interesting things of, too. I think when he took that cut and had to really lay it on because he was worried that it was going to get stopped, and he had to box. He almost boxed in that fight because of just the situation. He knew he had to get him out of there. Like he boxed Deontay in the second fight, and maybe a bit of the third one too. But Deontay was ready for it. But really in that second fight. But I think that's good too. Of just like, when you're coming back and you get forced into a shitty position like that, of, when he was off for a couple of years after he won the title, come back, getting put into a rough spot like that, where it's not like this guy's outboxing. You got to, lucky, nothing's lucky in fighting, but a good punch, got a good cut, and that forced him into, he had to really dig deep. And I think those moments are really good. I see in MMA so many guys discredit, ring rust. A guy like Dominic Cruz just says ring rust doesn't exist. It's all mental and all that stuff. I don't know. I think there's something to getting in there with a guy, and I wish the narrative or whatever you want to call it around that would change a little bit, so guys would feel more open to taking those shots. When you're off for 2 years, maybe don't jump into the top 3, top 5 ranked guys, or just go right to a title shot, right? Like even Connor coming back from boxing, I was like, well, this doesn't seem like a good idea, and unfortunately the way the UFC is structured, not unfortunately, because I think as a fan, we benefit greatly from how they structure it. So we get the great fights we do, but as a fighter, you get put into some really tight binds there by the UFC.
Yeah, that's the thing. I love Dominic Cruz, big fan of his.
Yeah.
Never met the man before, but just a big fan of him. Tons of respect for the guy. Like listen to him talk, and he's
a really intelligent guy.
Genius when he talks. When he's not trying to take stabs at people, of course, which
yeah.
can be funny, but it can be annoying though too.
It's because he's a nice guy, and I think and so much of it is about like your not honesty, but like your genuineness in fighting too. That when he tries to be mean, it just comes off kind of dorky because you can tell it's like you're not that dude. Like come on, like,
but he's got a way with words, so he knows how to make a person feel very little.
Yeah, he does, and I love hearing him with someone like Ariel Helwani or someone that really knows his story and can, volley the ball with him and really let him go into those things. I think sometimes when he's up against another fighter, it's almost too easy for him, and it almost comes across like mean because he is too good at it for some guys. It's just like, it's almost like when you're picking on a 6-year-old.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But with retrospect to all of that too, it's that ring rust that's definitely not the case. You have ring rust.
Yeah.
There's timing. You can train with the best guys in the world all you want, and you guys can go hard, but you're not there putting each other in the hospital when you're done sparring rounds the way you are in a fight.
Right.
Like two high-level guys go at it, more often than not, at least one of them, if not both guys, are in the hospital that night. My course, my 13 fights I had in my career, I was in the hospital 70% of the time afterwards.
Yeah. Win or loss.
Win or loss. And
hey, enough. Big squeaking dog.
All but one of my wins, I still ended up at the hospital.
Yeah.
Even in fights that I looked like I had a fairly easy time in the fight, I still ended up broken hands, stuff like that too. Yeah. So it's just how the game is.
That's what the game is, and I think guys going into it understanding that and being ready for that is almost a part of getting ready for a fight. Is understanding that good win, lose or draw, this might not end. It might not be very fun for me at the end of this day, right? Like I'm gonna have to go through some bullshit.
And that's why we don't do that on an everyday basis when we're sparring and training hard, because if we did that, we wouldn't make it to the fights ever. Like training's already the hardest part of what we do. Fighting's the easiest part. But yeah, if you went in there and trained with the mentality of this is a fight every single day, your body, you might get away with it for a while. And you might get lucky and not have any serious injuries, but the miles add up quick. And your body's like an engine, and the engine needs a tune-up, and it needs to be retuned. Essentially, that's us needing to take a break. And if we don't do it in time, it starts to break down. I'm living proof of that. Yeah. But if you don't take the time to rest and do the things proper, it's going to break you down. So with the whole ring rust thing, you're not able, when you're out for multiple years, you're not able to train at that intensity all the time to say that you don't have rust.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think in the last 2 fights with Dom, you've seen a little bit of rust. I don't want to say you're seeing age, because Dom's not old. Right. He's what, 33, 34? Yeah. So he's just at about the peak of where you're going to be for your peak.
He's not even old. It's just when you talk about that engine where he's been through miles, right? It's miles versus age, which is very interesting. Just like people look at MMA records, and you could take 5 people with a 13-2 record, and those could be 5 completely different fighters, right? Yep. It's a lot about competitiveness, and in fighting, looking at age, especially in some of the heavier weight divisions, it's all about miles, not about age.
Best example of that, honestly, is when you take a look at maybe I'll take some flack for saying it, but you look at the Khabib and George St. Pierre debate and who's the greatest there. Yeah, sure, I'm a Canadian.
I'm biased, so
I might be biased on this one. But I'm also a realist too. When I look at the sport, and you look at George's career, George's first fight was against a UFC household name. Yeah. And that was Ivan Menjivar. And that was George's very first fight. How many fights in Khabib's career did it take before he saw a name like that?
Yeah.
Half his career. And George was seeing these names almost basically from the get-go.
Yeah.
Within 5 fights, he's in the UFC. He's, 6th fight, he's fighting Karo Parisian. In the early 2000s, Karo Parisian was looking to be the next big thing until he met George. And George derailed that.
Yeah.
So you have that, and then George fights Matt Hughes for a world title. Sure, he lost, but then he comes back and he wipes the floor with Matt and makes Matt look like a B-level fighter, and then gets cocky and loses to Sarah, and then does the exact same thing and puts a beating on Sarah so bad that Sarah don't want no part of a rubber match he rightfully has the right to.
Yeah.
And he wants no part of it.
Well,
so
I
that
think
explains a lot.
And I think a guy like GSP is why he's, my favorite is not only was he that dominant too, but it was dominant in a way. It was such calculated dominance. I think what changed for me was when I read his book. Hey, enough. You just went to play. When I read his book a couple months back, and when you see how calculated all those things were, and as a fan of just watching from the outside, when you only see him the couple times a year when he steps into the ring and you don't get to see all the other stuff that goes into it, and how calculated it is, and how good of a team getting your ear licked off. Dog, enough.
Oh, I love you too, Missy.
Oh my goodness. But like that changed so much for me of just my understanding. I felt like my understanding of the sport went up noticeable levels just reading his book. And I was already a really big fan of the sport and really considered myself knowledgeable. And I was like reading it in awe of like, this guy is next level. And it was so interesting just to know of like all the stuff you're seeing in that book is what everybody in the sports know. He changed the entire game. Like nobody in the sport, like maybe Hoist Gracie.
No, exactly. And still to this day, like people want to say like, oh, yeah, like they bring up like the Connors and stuff, but Connor changed the fan base of the game.
He popularized
the sport.
Yeah, he didn't
change fighting. Fighting never changed. That left hand of his did not change anything.
And you could make an argument that his antics changed the game. But those antics go way back. That goes back to Ali. But
those antics now are getting old. If you haven't seen, people are getting sick of it now.
And if it's not the right fit too, if it's not your personality, like we talked about Dominic Cruz trying to be a bad guy, right? It's so noticeable when people try. One of the biggest examples for me is Kamaru Usman. He is a bad motherfucker. Don't get me wrong. But who he is as a person, hey, leave his toes alone. Jeez, you're a psycho dog. Usually you just chill out. You're too excited. What was I even saying there? I got distracted. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, no, and like we're still with George too. He was so dominant and so good that somebody like myself too, and this shows how big of a fan and how long of a fan of the sport I was. George got so dominant that by the time, I want to say it was right after really he fought BJ Penn the second time, and we have the whole grease gate fiasco there, which again is not George's fault. That was Phil Nurse. He did that. That's not on George. So people who say George cheated, George didn't cheat. And the commission caught it. They caught it and they wiped him down anyways. So it leveled back the playing field. But George was so dominant, and I was his biggest fan, and I'm one of the fans to say like he's the greatest MMA fighter of all time. The only argument you have out there isn't Anderson Silva, but Anderson Silva has popped.
So is John Jones.
John Jones has popped. Yeah. Like, they've all popped so far. So far. Kamara is about the next one closest. Tyrone Woodley, I'm sorry, you're not even in the conversation. You can talk all you want, but dude, you lost to Jake Paul. just sit down and be quiet now, okay? You got a big right hand, but you hide. So just be quiet.
and it's unfortunate with a guy like that too, of like, because when my fandom came in, like, I was always a huge fan, but when I got back into it, when I graduated university and just started, I had money to buy all the cards and enough time to follow it. That was right when Tyron Woodley kind of came into his own. So like he was a big deal to me, but it's so tough to watch him go and do what he did at the end of it. And it's tough because as a fan, you get to see the narratives that the UFC paints about these guys, but then the MMA media is so good, you get to see the fighters' actual stories. So it was really tough to watch a guy like Tyron Woodley who
didn't do himself a lot of favors. Like when you understand it from the UFC side,
Yeah.
he was not playing the game. He was not a company man, and I'm not saying you have to be a company man, right? And if you're not going to be, if you're going to go against it, you're going to pay the price. And he did.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, I was a fan of Tyrone. Like when Tyrone knocked out Josh Koscheck, I was the happiest guy in the world. I just do not.
Every
like
Canadian
Josh
was. Yeah.
I didn't like Josh even on the very first Ultimate Fighter. I don't like bullies. I can't stand bullies. I had a fight.
Enough.
I had a fight in my MMA career. Like myself, I'm a 145 pound fighter. And before I had my career-ending injury, we were going to drop to 135 pounds. And I fought a guy who was a 170er, and we met in the middle at 160. And in the negotiations, they kind of wanted to be, because it was another local guy too. And they said, okay, well, if we're going to come down to 160, then we want to be a winner-take-all fight. So the loser of this fight is only going to get $1. The winner gets all the money. And I just smiled right away because this guy was just nothing but a local bully. So for me, it was like, oh, perfect. I've been wanting this fight. I've wanted it for years. I've said it for 3 years at this. I wanted to fight, but with our weight classes, I didn't think it would ever really happen.
Yeah.
Because even myself, early on in my pro career, I started out 0-2, and then I went on this 3-fight win streak, and I got ranked in the top 20 in all of Canada in 2018 at 170 pounds. And when you go back and you look at that top 20 at 170, you still had George at number 1.
Yeah.
Like you had all these guys. Like my teammate Spencer Jebb was 14th on that list, and this guy beat the hell out of me on a daily basis. So it's like, it's time to put down the freaking the burgers and start eating some vegetables here and start getting some nutrition in my body here and be smart about things.
Taking it a bit more serious too.
Exactly.
And that's something that's so interesting to me, and I think it's very sad. Okay, dog, do I gotta go put you upstairs? Like, what is with you? Oh, I know. She just loves to play with people. I know. Why is she so psycho today? It's because I left her all morning and didn't take her on a long walk, just did a little one this morning. Hey. Okay, dog, come with your bone. Come with your bone. All right, come with me.
Sorry, Mason.
Come with me. You're going to have to sit with Dad now. You lost your privileges. Sorry. Sorry, dog. You want to put the headphones on?
You want to
put the headphones on? Oh, nope, you're staying.
Animals. They're like kids.
Yeah. So then that's something I noticed too, of like this progression of fighters. It's putting everything you can afford to put towards the dream at the start, right? Like you might have to work full time. You might need to, mats at the gym. You might need to do something, but you're putting everything you can towards it, right?
No, and that's exactly it. One of the questions that I get asked, actually, we had a documentary done on the local fight scene in Grand Prairie. It was called Small Town Strengths. I think they're still actually traveling around the world, getting in on film festivals and stuff like that with this documentary. It's actually pretty nifty. Yeah. It dives into a little bit of what I'd call is the second wave. Well, actually, no, it's more the third wave of MMA in Grand Prairie, because we had the first wave in the late 2000s, around 2007, 2008. And then myself, I was kind of part of the second wave that came in. And now we have this third wave where we're seeing, Alex, now the Ian Stobie's coming up and stuff, who's now looking to be his
Who's that young blonde kid?
That's Ian Stobie.
Oh, that's him.
That's Ian Stobie. That name, everybody remember that name.
That guy's got
18 years old, and he puts a beating on pretty much everybody in the gym. Alex is the only guy that can hang with him, and he's 18 years old.
He from the minute when I walked in the gym, not this latest round of doing the privates with you, but a couple of years back when I went in for those 3 classes.
Just a tiny guy.
Yeah, and I walked in just to check it out, just ask like what time the jiu-jitsu class was on, and the pro MMA class was on, and I saw him, and just the look in his eyes and just the mean look he has is like, oh, he like just in that group of guys that are all, I don't know nothing. You could tell who the guy was out of that group.
And the funniest thing with Ian is he's the nicest, humblest guy out there. He's that guy where he's there to do a job. He's there to train, and he's there to do the best he possibly can. He's not there to make enemies, but I don't think he's necessarily there to really make friends either.
Yeah. He's got a
goal, and he's set on his goal. And it's actually funny. His uncle's Bill Mahood, who's our coach, also our professor in jiu-jitsu too here. So yeah, there's a little bit more to it too. So he's got a bit of that
too.
A little bit extra, but we were talking, and he's kind of got that constant inner Dexter look on him, like, nah.
Dog. Okay, I'm gonna go get her a leash.
No worries, buddy.
I'm gonna go get you a leash, and you're gonna have to sit with me. Oh, you're gonna have to sit with me. I'm a good dog. I'm a good dog. Oh, okay, I'm just gonna grab her leash and I'll put it on the ground.
No worries, buddy.
Come here. Now you be good or you don't get this. Don't lie down. All right, sorry about that. This
no
dog
worries,
is just
buddy.
crazy.
She's
crazy,
loving
though.
life, buddy. That's all that matters.
She just loves meeting people and meeting new dogs all the time. And sitting at home like this just drives her nuts. She just wants to go out and do stuff.
Yeah. Understandable.
Lie
Yeah,
down.
no, Ian's Bill and I were talking, and he's, when you watch him, it doesn't matter whether he's had a good round, whether he's had maybe not such a good round. He's always got this look of just meh. Like the Rory McDonald's, just that cerebral Dexter look.
Yeah.
Like he's just, ooh.
Dexter, that's a good way to put it.
And the kid really is going to, like, it was late 2016, early 2017. I was starting to go on my run. He was still, I think he was only like 15 at the time. So been training with him since he was probably, I don't want to say between 10 and 11. You lose track of time over the years too. So I've been with them almost 10 years, but Ian's just small. And over the years, you watch your team photos, and he slowly gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But it was about 2016. He was just a little bit smaller than all of us. But Bill would always say, Ian, you got the green light. You get the green light, everybody. You can hit him as hard as you want. The rest of you guys, take it easy. Yeah. Control yourself, which is truly, that's what you want to do. You're not going to beat up a little kid. Like that's the last thing you want. And you want these kids to grow. You hurting them is not a way to make them grow. Plus you start causing the problems. You start making them shy, and they get scared, and they start getting holes in their game that you don't want, or bad habits. And bad habits are the hardest thing in the world to break, especially in fighting. You get somebody scared to do something, it's hard to break the habit.
Yeah.
And so I remember one day sparring with him, and it was always that way. Like, okay, you know, he's hitting me hard, but whatever. It's nothing, not a big deal. I can take it. It's nothing I haven't had before, blah, blah, blah. And one day getting ready for a fight, and I got done sparring with him, and I looked at his uncle and was just like, yeah, no more. No more green light. He's getting it back just as hard as he's dishing it.
Yeah.
Because this is starting to hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
He hit me with a 1-2, and my knees buckled, and I had that, the best way I could describe it's the old 80s Gittle blasters when the cassette player will end and goes pew, and that's exactly what was going on in my ears. It was just like, holy man. And I just had this, I don't want to say it was a euphoric feeling because it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
But it was just like, wow, my body's got these tingles going on, and wow, like I just don't feel like things are firing the way they should be firing. And it's like, no more. No more of this.
That's awesome to see him see him get to that level though.
Pretty much from then on, he's just been one of the hardest rounds in the gym, and constantly, and he's got the body length for it too. He's so tall and long, and he uses his range. The kid's a phenomenal Taekwondo fighter. It's what he's done his whole life.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, like, he just got promoted to his purple belt in Jiu Jitsu because he's been doing Jiu Jitsu with us forever. So at 18 years old, he's already got a purple belt. So he's going to he stays on this path now. By the time he's 21, 22, he could have a black belt around his waist. Yeah. He'd be one of the youngest black belts in the country.
Wow.
That's that new crop that's coming up.
Yeah.
But the kid's phenomenal. Like myself, I just get lucky with him on the ground because that's where I've now focused all my time. And I get little lockdown spots that I can just lock and hold the position and maybe ride out the round and not get submitted. To me, that's a victory.
Yeah.
If he doesn't submit me in a round, that's my victories now. There's the odd time I might get him to tap, but as long as I don't tap, that's victory enough for me.
Yeah. And that's what's cool about stuff. I mean, jiu-jitsu especially, but you can probably find this equivalent in the other martial arts too, of just at those different skill levels where it's just about setting your understanding and your mindset in the right spot for it, right? Going into it of, it'd be like if I went into a class and was getting really mad that I was getting tapped out. You're just going into the wrong mindset. Like, go into it. I know I'm going to get tapped out. I'm going to laugh every time. It's going to be funny. I'm going to ask, hey, what did you just do there? Like, I clearly couldn't breathe 6 different ways from Sunday, but I have no idea. How can you show me? Right. And that's so much more enjoyable. And that was the piece that was missing that first time. I couldn't just pierce that bubble. It never got to a point where I could ask, like, okay, well, how'd you get me? Right. Yeah. So I just felt like, well, it's don't get me wrong. It was still fun. And I still enjoyed it, but it was like, I was scared to go with anybody that knew anything because I didn't want to wreck their time. You go with some guy that doesn't know anything, right? I wanted them to enjoy it too. Yeah. So I just go with the other people that didn't know anything, but then we just be rolling around on the floor doing nothing. And then, the other side was it just couldn't ask that. But then when I went to that group class, the one group class I've gone to with you guys, other than the privates, it was so much nicer just to have a little bit more of that comfortability to try out a little bit of those things, roll with some of those other guys. That young kid that has been coaching with you DJ. For a bit. Yeah. He was awesome. Right. And like, as soon as, and he was good because he let me come to him with it. Right. Like when we first started rolling, he didn't say nothing, but got to one point and he just, say little things as he's going that made me feel comfortable enough to ask him. The first time he got me, I just said, hey, how'd you do that? And he showed me right away. Right. And then midway through, I'm just caught in a spot where I just have no idea what to do. Right. And there's no way. And he isn't even advancing. He's just letting me kind of squirm in this position. I'm like, well, how the hell am I going to get out of this? And I knew I had to roll one way or the other. And I just said, hey, I know we're in the middle of it right now. I could ask you after, but like, which way should I be trying to roll? And he just said, yeah, just try it. And he showed me and I learned in that, like, whatever it is, I don't know how long you guys put on the clock, but 6 minutes. In that 6 minutes, I learned so much from him and I was so thankful to it after. And like, when I think I even texted you later that night and just said like, man, that was awesome. Cause like that couple years ago when I went in, that's exactly what it was like. If I would have had one kid like that, done that, I don't think because it's addictive. Well, it is addictive. I don't think I would have been gone that long if I had that.
Yeah, no, and I can truly admit, your first time coming down, especially if it was with us back then, like 2015, 16, 17, even 18. Yeah. We had a lot of guys that were basically our entire jiu-jitsu program was MMA fighters.
That's what it felt like.
And that's all we were geared towards. That's why you'd see a lot of guys showing up not in gis and stuff like that. Me, myself, I always believed in at least even going into a fight camp. Lots of guys go, a couple weeks out, I don't even touch my gi at all. I still believed in 1 day a week inside my gi. Because if you can defend gi chokes, you can defend any non-gi choke that they're going to try to put on you. It's just rule of thumb. So it was... Back then, the class wasn't really designed towards trying to bring in business. It was build these guys to where they need to go. And if you come in, you're learning trial by fire. You're in the fire right away. There was no easy way out. And then it was about 2017. So it was probably, you would have missed it. I started noticing this too, because my goal when I got into this sport, I was 27 when I started MMA. And I knew at 27, I need an amateur career. You can't just turn pro like you could 10 years ago. It's just not going to work that way, guys. There's too much experience in the amateurs now. So I was like, I have to have an amateur career. I have to. I got to get my feet wet. So already looking at that, it's like, well, by the time I'm put in enough training to get a fight, get through an amateur, I'm probably going to be 30, 31 before I even think about turning professional. Dana White ain't looking for no 30-year-olds. He's looking for the young guys.
There was a 38-year-old in Contender Series last night.
There was
39.
Actually. I kind of watched this fight. I'll admit
it was a bit of a snoozer.
I was more so paying attention to other things, but I knew getting to the UFC was not going to be a thing.
It would be an uphill battle.
Very, very. It was. I'd have about the same chance of winning the lottery. And I knew that. But I remember sitting down with the very first coach that I had, and he'd asked me what the goals were. And at that time, George was the biggest thing. And again, how big of a fan I was in the sport. I think I forgot to say this earlier. I even started to root against George. Where it's like, all right, you need to lose. We need to see you lose so maybe we can see this game evolve more. But he just never lost. No. I go back, even like I said, as a fan, I've rewatched that Hendricks fight, and everybody always talks about damage. Well, guys, there's some people out there that you can just flick in the face, and they're going to mark, bruise, swell, and cut. George is just one of those guys. Watch that fight, no crowd, no biasness, turn the sound right off, and prepare yourself for 25 minutes, and watch. George wins that fight.
Yeah.
10 out of 10 times he's won that fight. You do not look at the marks on the face. You look at control. He controlled the fight. Johnny couldn't do it. And this is steroided out Johnny. I don't care what anybody says.
He looked different.
Johnny was on steroids because he wasn't the same guy once USADA came in.
He's the biggest example. I think there may be somebody that's a bigger
other than TRT Vitor.
Yeah, TRT Vitor might be the best
and Uberim.
But other than that, of like just talking about like even more so like performance wise, like I think those guys looked physically different. You could see it in their bodies how different they looked when USADA came in. Johnny too, but
he was softer up top. He was bigger up top.
Right. But it was his performance where it was he didn't look like the same fighter after.
He didn't have the same pop in his shot. And there's certain things out there that can help you develop that with those extra vitamins.
And you never know, and you never want to put that too, because it always seemed like a guy like Johnny Hendricks too is there's certain guys that like you would never question the work they're putting in. Like I'm trying to think of an example, like a TJ Dillashaw, right? Like the way they train, like you can have some questions about like the stuff he takes, about like, he's putting some shit in. Whereas a guy like Johnny Hendricks, I think Kevin Gastelum had a bit of this. I think he's kind of shook it now, but like had a bit of this idea of like the commitment stuff too. And I wonder with guys like that too, it's hard to just say it's all this area, because almost you run that, if you're not one of those guys that's like the TJ Jill or the guys that you can't pull those guys out of the gym, right? If you're not that, you run that risk after maybe not every fight, but every loss, you run that risk of losing the love. And if you don't have that love, that's the only thing keeping you in there.
You are actually onto something there, because I figured for myself, I figured this out early in my career. So like I said, starting out my career, I was fighting at 170 pounds. My first amateur fight was 170. I ended up fighting a guy who went on to be the number 5 ranked light heavyweight boxer in Canada shortly after that. He had a 3-1 MMA pro career too. And in boxing, his only loss actually was to Nick Ring. So I think he was like 4-1 or 5-1. He took that loss to Nick, and he stopped boxing too. Just didn't seem to handle losses very well, I think, which is a shame, because he was a talented fighter. But I, like I said, started out at 170, and then I dropped to 155. Funny, ironically, I missed that weight cut to 155. And then my third fight was supposed to be at 155, and we ended up changing. I think I went through 5 or 6 opponents 2 weeks before the event. And with the last, I think it was like 8 days or 9 days out, kind of locked down another local guy. So I actually got to be one of the first local fights in Grand Prairie altogether too. And we signed at a catch weight. So I would have made 55 on that fight. My weight was so good. But the catch weight was at I think it was 160, and I came in 158. And then I had my first child, and we had a lot of health issues and stuff like that with my wife and whatnot with the pregnancy. She ended up in Edmonton for a long time. So I ended up commuting back and forth, and started to eat a lot of restaurant food. And I found, unfortunately, being at the Strollery at the time, I don't know if they still do have it, but I believe it was a White Spot. And I found out they had a poutine burger there. And at first it was just I'll give this a try, because myself, I'm actually allergic to red meat, so I can't eat the stuff. I get really sick.
Don't agree with you.
It doesn't agree with me. I need a bathroom by me, or I need a bucket by me. And it's gotten progressively worse since then. So that's why I also was able to make that cut to 45 too, because I figured this all out. But anyways, I found that, and it went from just a one-off thing to it became a once a weekend thing to an everyday thing to almost every meal was now this burger, while I was going back and forth to the hospital visitor.
I've been there.
So I went from walking around at about 163, 64 pounds to back up to 210 pounds. And then we had our child and whatnot, and then I got a phone call from another gym just because I'd left my current gym and I was in limbo on what I was going to do. Was actually thinking I might not even ever get back into it again. And then I got called and asked if I'd want to come in and kind of start working with kids in a jiu-jitsu program. And at first I refused to teach kids. I didn't want to teach kids. I didn't think I had the mind frame to teach kids, or the patience. Turns out, I guess I did. So I agreed to come over. Later on, I realized there was more politics involved. And the reason why I actually got brought over is because I had a blue belt, and you needed to have a blue belt in order to start a kids jiu-jitsu program. And this guy was just he was a judo guy, but he was a white belt in jiu-jitsu. So I got brought over, and as soon as he finally got his blue belt through Roberto Tusa Alencar, who was John Jones and all the big guys at Jackson Winklejohn's jiu-jitsu coach. That's who that was. So I taught under that guy for a while too. But when this guy had gotten his blue belt from him, he decided I don't need you anymore, and kind of kicked me to the side and sent me to go and do a kickboxing program, which sure, I was a kickboxer too. In North America, they've belted in kickboxing, but truly there's no belts in kickboxing. But in North America, I have the equivalency of the brown belt, essentially. So I've done it for enough that I know enough on the sport. So I went and I did that. And then I was just like, I got the itch to get back to training and fighting. I wanted to fight. So I tried to do some amateur fights again, but things just weren't working out. Injuries and guys dropping off and stuff too. So I was like, all right, I think it's just time to make the change. It's take this more serious. And two, the wife was just like, it's a lot going out and nothing's coming in. We have a kid now. So if at least what you're putting into it, you can at least get it back and we stay even, then okay, you can continue. And I think still at the beginning, we were taking a little bit of a hit, but I was just finding ways to make it work and stuff.
Supplement it, make it work. Yeah,
exactly. But I had gained a lot of weight. And in my very first fight, I had signed the contract professionally 7 weeks out at 155 pounds. And I was 207.8 pounds when I signed that contract. 7 weeks out. So I didn't know really anything about dieting and nutrition. I just knew clean up your eating, don't eat garbage, stay away from pizzas, all this stuff. So I got really crazy intense with everything and dieted right down to the point where I just cannot stand eating certain foods anymore because that's all I ate. Like cucumber, no, sorry, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Oh, cucumbered yourself?
If I can taste cucumber, I can't. Like people are like, oh, cucumber water. Nope. Thank you. I'm good. I just can't do it.
How much were you able to cut down before you had to do like the cut?
The morning of the weigh-in, I woke up so weigh-ins were at 4:00 that afternoon. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, I think it was. And I woke up at 5:00 in the morning because the Eastlink Center opened up at 5. And I called my training partner who was helping me through all this because I was still new to Bill's team yet, so I hadn't earned his rights to have the coach. Because I also came in. Normally with Bill, you need to train a while before he'll give you the okay to take a fight. Well, I had already taken a fight and joined the team. So I was kind of more so looked at as a guy who's paying to do a training camp versus a guy who's on the team. So really my first pro fight, I wasn't actually really technically a Mahon fighter, even though I trained out of the gym. Kind of, I guess you could say more independent than anything, and nobody should ever fight. Don't be stupid.
Wouldn't recommend that.
Definitely don't recommend that. Have a good coach. So did that fight, woke up that morning and checked that scale. And I was, like I said, I was like 207.8 and it was like, I was 155. I was 168.2. So I was just over 13 pounds and I had just under 12 hours to lose that weight. Again, didn't know much about weight cutting either because as an amateur, I didn't really have to cut weight. We just always dieted things down and trained hard and got the weight down. So again, left to my own accord, I definitely didn't do it right. If I would have given myself 8 weeks, I would have made this weight. 7 weeks was too soon. But I dieted down, and my first mistake is we raced over to the Eastlink Center and we went right to the sauna. And I spent 3 hours in the sauna. And I sapped so much moisture out of my brain versus out of the body that I didn't lose a ton of weight, even though I sweated like a lot, but not a lot came out of the body. And it was like, okay, the saunas aren't working and we need a break because I can't be in the sauna for more than freaking 5 minutes. I'm pulling my hair out now. So we went back to the house and we got in the tub. And then we had tub issues too. So it was like, oh my God. And then here was the real kicker was we were getting set. We just got the tub finally set up and it was like, okay, we're not leaking. We're not draining water out. We got hot water. Perfect. Got in there. I just got comfortable and my phone goes off and it's the promoter. And the promoter, I don't even answer it. My buddy answers it and I can hear the whole conversation. And the promoter's like, yeah, so we got a problem. And right away, I'm like, oh, for fudge sakes, like you've got to be kidding me. Like I've done all this work. I've got this close now. Like I can taste this pro debut. It's what everybody wants it to, which I probably shouldn't have done that. I should have waited a couple more years to turn pro too. But all that. And now you're telling me as I've already started the weight cutting process and I've been cutting weight now for 5 hours almost that my fight's off. Wow. So I'm starting to lose my mind and the promoter can hear me starting to like cuss and steaks and all this, and I'm starting to get out of the tub. And he goes, no, wait. We have a solution though, but there's a kick to it. And at this time, I didn't realize. I thought this promoter was my friend, not realizing that I
think every fighter can say that.
Most promoters, unless they're a promoter out of your local club and gym, they're probably not your friend. And this guy, he made you feel like he was your friend, but really he just used the local guys. He really favored another town's gym, more so his hometown, and he used us to try to bring them up and boost them and all that stuff too, which whatever, that's fighting. But you live and you learn. So that being all said, told me that, we do have a guy, but he was supposed to fight at 145. So he doesn't have to cut weight anymore, but you're still going to have to cut weight. I had to get to 55 still. And I think I still had eight or 9 pounds to go. And it was like, okay, whatever, we'll do it. Well, that guy ended up being Tom O'Connor. And if anybody knows the regional scene and stuff like that, Tom O'Connor is probably one of the top guys in the regional scene at 155 and 145. It's 9-2 right now. He just last year beat the only guy that beat Kamaru Usman, even though lots of guys have beat him, but still, that's a name on your record too. So there's some ties there, which are kind of cool when you think about it. Tom, very, very good. Well, I take that fight on basically 7 hours notice of the weigh-in. So we're looking at under 36 hours from the fight. So we go through, still do the weight cut process. We get to about 2:00 and all of a sudden I stop sweating. My body's not sweating anymore. We go back to the sauna. We're trying to sauna everything. I'm not sweating. Nothing's happening. I'm in, I think I had 3 sweatshirts on, 2 pairs of sweatpants. I had the sauna suits on over top, all that stuff. 45-minute drive to get to the weigh-ins from where we work. Heat cranked, everything, get there. We stripped down. I'm still bone dry, but I'm so dehydrated at this point that you could pinch my skin and my skin wouldn't retract. It stayed pinched. Heart rate, like my blood pressure, heart rate through the roof. I remember the after weigh-in medicals and stuff. I ended up missing weight too, by the way, which most embarrassing thing ever in my career was to miss my pro debut weight. And then to perform the way I did too was really crappy. But
how can you perform after a cut like that?
Like, exactly. And not really knowing anything about it and how to rehydrate properly either. Because I hadn't put the time in to really think about this. I thought, fight, which is stupid because I wanted to be the next Feroz Hobby. That was the second part that I told my first coach out of the 2 things I wanted to do was, one, be a champion if I could, but ideally it was to be the next Feroz Hobby of Western Canada and one day maybe be the guy in all of Canada. That's my ultimate goal for coaching wise. So I should have known all this stuff truly at the time, but I didn't. And so we missed that weight. And it was one of the worst experiences of my life. Did that fight, but also because of that weight cuts and everything, it took me about 8-9 months before I felt normal again. Not that I took a lot of damage in the fight.
That's what you put your body.
Yeah, like I ended up losing in the second round by rear naked choke, but I didn't take a lot of damage in the fight. I was able to slip a lot of stuff. Like it was the only fight of my career that I got hurt with a body shot. Tom did catch me with a right cross to the liver. That did kind of in the second round. You even kind of, I think in the video you even might hear me go, and I let out this this kind of weird sound. And he starts putting on some pressure, and I was able to kind of clinch up with him and spin him on the cage. And I'm not sure. He'll know for sure or not, but I think I might have almost finished him. I hit him with a really good elbow and uppercut combo, and he dropped, and I kind of picked him up and tried to keep going, and he weathered the storm, and I gassed out. He circled out, and I was just a sitting duck at that point. He was able to get a hold of me, take me down, and choke me out. So, so after that fight, took all that time off. Well, I also did the worst thing ever, which I think some of these guys do, which leads back to what you're talking about with the seriousness of it too, and constantly training and all that. I gained all that weight back. And now I gained all this weight, and it was like, oh, for crying out loud, got offered another fight. And it was like, yeah, no, I'm not going down to 55. Yeah. We'll go to 170. So I took the fight at 170. I was actually doing really good. Like I got hit with a leaping uppercut at the start of the fight. Buddy took me down, but instantly I cage walked him, rolled him over. I was holding position, but I was still relatively new, I guess you could say, to jiu-jitsu, even though I'd been doing it for about 4 years. But Bill was my first real, well, no, I shouldn't say that, because I did have like Roberto Tusa Alencar and Barada, and also Ryan McGillivray that kind of helped guide me through my jiu-jitsu for a couple of years. But them being in Edmonton and New Mexico, I didn't get to see them very often. Yeah. It was very few and far between. So it still was left to my own accord for a lot of things, trying to figure things out. And then especially on MMA, I was all on my own. Yeah. And then having Bill, I still was now just starting to work my way in with the team. So starting to figure out some stuff, but I still hadn't earned that right to have him as my coach.
Didn't have your patch.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't get the patch yet. And I made some mistakes while I was on top, and I left my arm hanging out. Buddy, being tall and long and lengthy for our size, threw up an arm bar and he caught me, and I tapped, and because it was in tight right away too. And the ref didn't see the tap. He was in bad position and all that stuff too. Didn't see the tap, and I'll never forget it. I remember Buddy repositioned, and my arm kind of I got relief for a second, and I was like, oh, and I remember him looking at me. He goes, "I'm sorry," and I'll never forget that. "I'm sorry," right before he yarks on my arm and dislocates my elbow. Oh. Yeah. And there's nothing I could do. So I'm out on the shelf for another year. So I'm out for a year. I gain all that freaking weight back again. And I'm back up to 210 pounds. Didn't think I'd ever fight again, but I'm still coming in and training and stuff like that. And it was Spencer Jebb, actually, one day we were talking, and I told him, I was like, yeah, I think I'm just done with all this, man. Cause I used to go in and just train me and him during the daytime. And we weren't, we're fairly good friends once we started training together, but I believe we always knew who each other were through the athletics in the region, because we're both Peace Country boys and stuff, both knew it through the sports and all that. And he was actually the first one to kind of tell everybody, when everybody couldn't believe how, I guess, athletic I am. I'm very acrobatical. I'm one of those guys. You shoot on me, I'll front flip your shot and I'll land on the other side on my feet. I'm very agile. He would tell everybody, he's like, he's a lifelong athlete, you guys. Was a high level athlete growing up his whole life. I just didn't look the part anymore. Tyson Fury in a way. Just a very smaller version of him and very less talented. But no, I had that athleticism. So when I was talking to him and telling him, I was like, I think I'm done. I never forget him looking at me and mind my language, but he was like, fuck you. You're not done yet. He's like, you haven't even got started. He's like, you had 2 crappy fights to start. You're not even in proper weight classes, none of that stuff. He's like, get your crap together, start training and get going. And, I thought about it, and I still hadn't made a decision to decide to come back. I was still kind of set on maybe I'm done. I was helping out, coaching a lot of boxing now again, and I dove back into that and was helping out there, and then helping with the kids' jiu-jitsu and all that stuff. And I was really starting to build myself now as a coach more than the fighter itself. And then it was late January, early February of 2017, I got offered a fight with another guy who was 0-3. And I think I thought about it. I was like, well, I'm 0-2. He's 0-3. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And truly, when I looked at the guy, I won't give out names or anything just because I don't want to be that guy. But when I looked at him, it was like, man, if I don't win this fight, and if I don't win this fight easy, I don't belong in this sport. Like, this is a fight I shouldn't even really get hit in. Like, this is how easy this should be. And in the end, I didn't. He didn't hit me at all in the fight, other than when he headbutted me at the weigh-ins, and then when he cheap shotted me with a kick at the start of the fight. When he went to slap hands, as soon as he slapped hands, he kicked me. And I was like, you dirty rat bastard.
Oh, who did that a couple of years ago to Beneil Dariush? A young kid coming in on his debut. He's in the UFC now. Was it Alex Hernandez?
It might be.
I think it might have been. I think it was Alex Hernandez coming in.
I know Silva did that to Canadian. Forgetting his name. Montreal boy.
Against Anderson?
No, not Anderson. Eric Silva.
Oh.
Yeah, Eric Silva at 170 did it. He went to fake the touch glove, and then he punched me, and then he got knocked out later.
I hate that shit.
Forgetting buddy's name.
I hate that shit. And so many, and this is the thing, as a fan, that just absolutely boils me. But I've heard a lot of fighters talking about it, and they just say, you know what, as soon as you're in that game, always be protecting yourself, be ready for everything. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, but still it seems like so greasy to me. Like I think it was Alex Hernandez, who I'm a big fan of now, but it took a lot for me to get over that, because I remembered that when he came into his next one, I was like, oh, this is the fucker that cheap shot at Dariush off the start, right? And I didn't like that, because, you know, like a guy like Beneil Dariush, you love the guy, right? Like just, you know, one of the guys you want to cheer for and you want your kids to cheer for and look up to, right? Like one of those really good dudes in sport. To do that to him with it kind of just, it was just so disrespectful in your UFC debut to come in like that. But
no, I totally agree with you. And you know what? Maybe for Hernandez too, granted, although I think that was part of his character early on, because look at what he did with Cowboy, even though he got humbled.
Oh, did he?
And you know what? I give him credit. I actually give him credit. His last fight, he looked real good. The kid looked really good.
He
looked like he mentally matured.
For sure.
That was the biggest thing, was the mental maturity, and which was good to see. He didn't talk. Granted, I didn't pay much attention to his fights build up and stuff, but I didn't hear a lot. Didn't sound like he was saying a lot. And what I was hearing was just your typical normal fighter interview.
Yeah.
Not like it was in the past.
Yeah. Like but unfortunately with the way it's set up, you almost need to do so. It was almost like when you get that shot of like just this last minute shot, short notice against Beneil Dariush, if you don't come in with some sort of
the anxieties of like, oh my God, I'm in the show now. Like, oh, you're excited.
For sure.
Excitement.
But that isn't even enough, right? Like you see Colby Covington, who is talented and was winning fights, but the way he was winning them, he was going to get cut. They said, as soon as you lose, we're cutting you. So he had to do this whole heel turn where he brought up this persona. When you talk to people that know him, apparently he's just the nicest guy, and this is all an act.
Well, and that's why with the UFC, I don't necessarily believe the best fighters in the world are in the UFC because of how it's geared towards. People don't realize is it's kind of like boxing in the sense. Boxing for a while went to the point where they're like, we want knockouts. We want the knockouts. We don't want these technical boxing matches. So you were seeing the Deontay Wilders come in and truly flourish in fighting, because boxing was the aforementioned part. Even myself, I got like going to other gyms and stuff, like just traveling when I was growing up too, doing some boxing. I'm a switch stance fighter. I switch through left hand or my southpaw, my orthodox very fluently. And some of these old school boxing coaches would just scream at you for doing it because it's not traditional. It's not the traditional way, but it's the evolution. Like you look at Lomachenko, for example. That's the prime example of the evolution of the footwork in fighting.
Yeah.
And now you see Tyson Fury's got some kind of Lomachenko-esque in his footwork too, to get these angles, to get around guys, and they don't even know. It's like, how the hell did you get over here?
And if you look at it, I'm just doing it quickly in my head, going up through the champions of each division. All of them are amazing switch fighters, right? Izzy can switch, right? Like
Kamaru can switch,
right? And
Rose is one of the nicest at switching.
All of them. It started off as some of those kind of taboo. It became something like, oh, that's a good tool to have in your toolkit, to now you're almost a step behind if you can't.
Well, and it's mind frames of the sport too, right? It's like, I've always laughed at everybody who is like, oh my God, I'm fighting a southpaw and I'm a right-handed fighter. Oh, this is so awkward. Oh, and it's like, how do you find it so awkward? It is no more awkward for you as it is for me, the southpaw. I've got the exact same issues. Your right hand is as troublesome for me as my left hand is for you. Yeah. And it just comes down to who is going to win the foot battle for for what we're trying to do. If I'm trying to stay outside of you and do all this, then I want to be outside of you and I want to play that game, and hopefully I can get you to play that game with me. But if I want my foot inside and I want to come forward on you, then I'm going to play that game and I'm going to get you there. But it's a battle of it's the foot. It's that lead hand versus lead hand is where the true battle comes down.
Yeah.
So I laugh when people think they blow these things up. Like, it's like, oh my God. And it's like, it's the exact same thing for you. Chill out.
It's as big a deal as you make it. If you make it a big deal, it's going to be a big deal. But if you go into it, it's like you're saying, he's up against the same things that he's on. And sure, he might be up against orthodox fighters more often than you get looks at southpaws. But if you want, here's the thing. It depends about your why too, because for some guys that know, like with fighting, I think with everything, but especially with fighting, it's easy to make the example. Why you're doing it has huge impact on how you're going to go about it and everything, right? Like you're on a leash. You can't jump up there, dum-dum. There's some guys that it doesn't matter because their mindset is, I want to be a champion. And if I'm going to be a champion, I need to be able to beat whoever put it. It doesn't matter if they're southpaw, orthodox, switch fighter, wrestler, a jiu-jitsu specialist. I need to be able to beat everyone in the world, because if I have that belt and that second best guy in the world is a southpaw, what are you going to not fight him because he's a southpaw, right? And there's some guys that just want to go in and just want to make the most money and be the most entertaining. Some guys want to just see what heights they can personally reach, see like kind of what they can do. And I think that has a really big impact. And I don't think is even documented enough of how important that is, because that impacts how you go about the fight, how you're going to react in the crunch times of the fight, which fights you're going to take, right? Like it impacts your whole career.
Well, and the other part to it too, where I think too, is you look at these guys that are really good at the switch fighting and moving their feet always, they're not just fighters. They're more than fighters.
They're athletes.
Not just athletes too. They're martial artists.
That's a big
so they don't just train for the purpose of, I'm in this prize fight, I'm in blood money. They're training for also, what happens if I step outside?
Right.
You're not always. That's why you see. I chuckle when you see all these up and coming guys and stuff that want to come in and they want to fight, and they hurt their hand, and I can't train. I hurt my hand. Don't use the hand. What happens in the fight if you break your hand and it's so bad enough that it doesn't numb up and you can't use it?
Yeah.
You got to figure out all the other limbs of how to use it to figure out how to win. Or are you just going to throw your hands up? Well, I quit. Yeah. Well, I hate to tell you this, you're not a fighter. You don't have what it takes to be a fighter. And I'm not saying that to be ignorant. It's just some of us are built differently, and which is with everything in life.
Right.
Some of us are built to be doctors. Some of us are built to be nurses. Some of us are to be hairdressers.
Yeah.
Some of us are built to be fighters or warriors.
Yeah.
It's like firemen. That's the best example I can give. Is you see firefighters and soldiers. When the fire happens, you hear the fire, you smell the smoke, you hear the explosions, you hear the gunfire. Those guys are running towards that stuff. Everybody else runs away.
Yeah.
Fighters, the worst thing you can do is back us to a corner and stick your hands up and say, you got no choice. Okay, we're coming forward. Yeah. Truly, if we're martial artists at the end of the day, or the actual warriors of life, we're going to try to avoid that conflict.
Right.
But if you're not going to let me avoid the conflict and I have no choice, you damn well right that I'm welcoming this situation, because I train every day of my life for this exact moment. And exactly, that's it. And that's the one thing for myself that's really switched up since I've retired from fighting, is my purpose switched long before in my training, but now my sole purpose is, what happens if somebody does attack my family or me? Because especially in this city, man, you got people walking into houses now, left, right, and center.
Crazy, hey?
Yeah, shootings happening all over the place in a town of 70,000. It's freaking nuts.
Stealing vehicles left, right, and center.
And that's exactly
in broad daylight, coming back to the same place to steal more vehicles.
And with all these mandates the governments are putting on us, I'm predicting actual violence happening here soon enough.
Yeah.
Because of the way people are coming after each other for their beliefs. So myself, I just keep my opinion to myself, and if somebody wants to push the level too far, well, I'm prepared to defend myself.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a bad day for you.
Something I've brought more so I've really talked a lot on this podcast through the lens of hockey, because I've seen so many, and the NHL is doing a really good job now of identifying this, but for so long, there were so many of these NHL guys that have such an identity of, I'm a hockey player, that when they retire, they really struggle. They get into a lot of addiction issues. There's a lot of struggle. And I think you see this in fighting too, right? I think, look at Chuck Liddell, so many of these guys that don't want to hang out because that's their identity. I'm curious for you, as someone that's kind of in the middle of that transition phase of retiring. I know, you say you're retired, but I promise, if the right thing came across the board, I'm sure you might still say no, but you'd probably think about it, right? Just from the way I've heard you talk about it, it's probably hard to let go.
It is.
I wonder, so that has a big deal when we talk about that why you're doing it, and you just talked about what it's transitioning to. I'm curious, along the journey of your path, has that why changed? Like when you first got into it, do you remember what was that why that was really of why you wanted to fight, why you wanted to test yourself? When you talk about like the transition of going pro, or maybe it was a certain fight, has that why changed along the way? And has that been something that you've been like asking yourself along the way, or is it just kind of you do it because you enjoy it?
No, 100% it has changed. Because again, like I've been a lifelong fight fan. So, like I said, I was 1989. I was 5 years old, 6 years old when I started boxing. Yeah. So I've been immersed in it. Again, maybe I wasn't constantly training in the arts, but as an athlete my whole life growing up too. And I was always watching it. Plus birthday parties and hangouts, us friends, we always 2 pairs of boxing gloves, San Francisco. $29. Yeah. You could buy 2 sets of boxing gloves back in the day. They weren't the best boxing gloves, but and we'd go to town. They got the job done, and we'd go to town on each other. We'd even go as far as getting dad's skidoo gloves because they were bigger, and we'd go after each other with them.
We would just after I don't know if this if you played hockey or if any point in this,
a lot of street hockey and rink hockey. Never organized though.
Well, we got glad you missed this part because this is the dumbest shit. Even admit, like just saying what we did now just feels stupid, but you're a kid at the time of just cage rages where you just throw on your helmet with your cage on and a pair of hockey gloves.
Oh, we did that
just
too.
Go bomb at each other.
We did that too. We just didn't put hockey helmets on.
Oh, me and my buddy Drew used to do it at my place where one of us and one of us would get the shitty little helmet that didn't fit too good. So the chin guards right there, our mouths are bleeding, and you just go to town on each other. And like, I'm not a fighter. Like I told you that the first day I walked in, like my biggest thing is like, I don't want to get hurt doing this. Like I'm really interested, and I don't want to hurt anybody. I just want to learn. But I'm a teddy bear. I don't want to hurt nobody. But just get into just letting that fly of like in those moments we were going hard and swinging leather. And he's a tough kid. Like he had 2 older brothers. He's a tough guy. Always knowing like he's been in a few fights, right? And I'm just there, just trying not to get my head blown off. But just the headaches you'd have, and like when you look back on just how stupid that was to do, like. Wouldn't change for a second. You need to learn that boys will be boys. That's good life lessons that you pick up in that bullshit, as stupid as it is. But man, if I could go back and tell myself, maybe not the smartest way. Maybe go to a boxing gym and just pick up a little head movement. You'll get
head movement too. And honestly, I might be different than all of this stuff. I've received my fair share of concussions. Yeah. I was told right out of high school that I wouldn't play contact sports anymore because I'd received a couple of real bad concussions in football. My sophomore and my senior year of football ended both my last 2 seasons on the injured list with concussions. But the last one was a real bad one. I was 3.5 months where I was messed up, wasn't able to be left on my own and stuff like that. Plus, back then we didn't actually know much about concussions like we do now. Like back then it was don't let them sleep. Try to keep them awake as much as you can. Now it's like, no, let them sleep as much as you can. Just go and tap them and just see if they move. Give them the old party trick. Tickle their face with a feather, and if they move to it, you leave them be because they're responding. Now, if they're not responding, okay, we got a problem. We got to wake them up and get to the hospital type deal. But yeah, no, the helmets. It's like I go back to you look at rugby and American football and you look at concussions. Sure, there's concussions in rugby, but compared to American football,
it's night and day.
Night and day.
Because you learn to use your head as a weapon.
Well, it's not just to use your head as a weapon. You stop caring because I got this great big thing on my head.
That's a much better way
I'm going to hit you with it. Yeah. And then for boxing, this is why, because I had talked to a guy a couple of years ago and I kind of brought this up too, because I stopped wearing headgear in 2012. Yeah. And this is coming from a guy who was told he'd never be able to do contact sports again because of concussions. And then 10 years after, I got the all clear to go back to fighting, of all things. Like that blows people's minds. They're like, how could you possibly? But I also believe too that in that 10 years, because the human brain doesn't stop generating brain cells as a male till we're 27 years old. I believe from the time that I was 18 till I was 27, I wasn't taking contact to the head and all that other stuff. I was recovering. And I was able to recover to a stage where I was able to come back and do this stuff. And yes, since being in fighting, I've had two I wouldn't say bad concussions, but I've had 2 decent ones where I was like, yeah, I know myself. I need to slow down. And that happened after my last 2 fights. Ironically, I got TKO'd and knocked out cold in those 2 fights. So I just knew it was like, okay, and that's another reason why getting told that I wouldn't be get medically cleared, not for concussion reasons, but because of my spine and what happened to my neck. I already kind of knew that the door was closing anyway, especially with the way my career ended. It's like, the chin's going away. You can't take the shots the way you used to. Because I used to be, so the reason why I got called Moose. Not only did I just come forward, but I would take everything you would dish at me and I would walk through it. I'd put you against a cage, I'd pick you up, and I would dump you on your head. And then I'd go to work. And I lost that ability.
And do you think that makes it easier or harder having someone, because this is the other thing with hockey too, is, or the NHL, it seems like with fighting, it seems like there's a lot more writing on the wall sometimes. Whereas a hockey player, Sometimes it's you block one shot, or your skate catches a rut and you blow your knee, and that is the end. You in your head, I've got another 10 years of this, and then all of a sudden it's gone. Whereas fighting, it can be that too. Definitely, there's that.
For me, that's what actually had happened. That's exactly what had happened for me. It was a blink of an eye, and everything changed.
Yeah.
Like I was, even now, like at the time, Bill never said it, but he said it to me a little while ago, but he brought it back, talking about it. And he's like, man, the shape you had got into before you hurt your neck.
Yeah.
Like, and for Bill, who's been around the sport and has seen a lot, and to see him,
and it means a lot,
be like that. And it does. And especially to have him say, like, one of my fights was one of his most memorable fights that he's ever cornered too. And that man's cornered a lot, and have that be amongst his most memorable, that means more to me than anything. I could win a UFC title, and that would not mean as much to me as hearing that. So it means a lot, but it also showed me, like, he saw something. And I was like, and that's the part that eats me alive every day right now, is oh my God, on my deathbed, I'm always going to have that what is if. And especially when you go at Tapology and you look at my record right now, it's 4-6. It looks horrible. But you look at the who that I fought, and there was only 2 kind of gimme fights, and one of them, we just didn't know anything about the guy because he was 0-0, and I was 1-2 at the time when I fought him, so it kind of still made somewhat sense to take a fight like that. But you look at right after that, I go into a winner take all fight at a catchweight, and then I fight Tom O'Connor, who was already now in the top 10 in the country. He hadn't quite hit that top spot yet, but it hit a top 10. And then right after I lose to him, I go on and I decide to fight Nick Harabik, who's another monster at 155. I come in underweight. Like I'm walking in on the scale at 151 pounds. He's struggling to make 156. So come fight time, Nick's probably about 180. And I'm maybe 155. Yeah. So it's just these discrepancies. So it was like, okay, like you got to put the work in and drop that weight. But yeah, it was just that what if, because especially to come in, and even though it's MMA math, and MMA math is the worst math in the world. It gets you in tons of trouble. And I mean this with the utmost respect, because no, do I not think I can beat this gentleman, but it's just cool to know that I beat a guy fairly easily that beat this gentleman that's now in the UFC. He just earned a contract, but he earned that contract. And I was proud to watch that as a fan. I'm a fan of him. Granted, before I used to look at his name as, that's a guy on the radar list that I may have to fight, especially dropping to 135. Just because you're going to make a cut like that, you're trying to go places still too. And that's the one thing too, is I had known that even though I didn't have the prettiest record, the style of fights I'd put on, like I gained TKOs. They were watching me. Like if I had beat Tom O'Connor, I would have signed with TKO, but I ended up losing to Tom. And then my ego got in the way and was like, no, but I got to get back in there. And plus this guy was saying he wanted to fight me. So, all right, let's do this up too. And now I should have stepped back, take time off, because I'd fought 4 times in 10 months, should have been 5 times in 10 months. But we had a full card cancel in October. So I'd had a busy year. I should have taken the time off and then came back at 45. Instead, took a fight, got TKO'd in that fight, which was my first TKO loss, which was the first time I think somebody actually exposed me truly. And when I look back at my career, there's some fights that I got my butt kicked in for sure. But there was moments in those fights where I could have almost won. Like there was one, for example, the Jesse Bolt fight in Saskatoon. I got smashed in that fight, truly. He got me in the corner partway through the first round, and I think I've received somewhere upwards of like 40 some knees in that corner before finally getting out of that corner. But had I been just an inch closer, I think it was a left hand I threw, I hit him and he did the stanky legs and went back into the ropes. But I'd thrown so much into it too that I couldn't put enough pressure on right away to capitalize, and he was able to gain his distance, recover, and then the round ended, and then he caught me with a short little inside hook as I came in second round, which led to the finish. So it was just, now it was like, okay, time to make those cuts and get down and weight and all that stuff. But then I go in and I fight that fight at 145. And that was the other part that blew a lot of people's mind. Like I remember the day before the weigh-ins, it was even a bit of a battle for that year, like 2017, after I'd won that winner take all fight. I actually wanted to go to 145, but Bill wasn't sure. He's like, I don't know, buddy. I don't know about this. And it was actually after that winner take all fight where everything changed for me with the whole weight things too. I stopped gaining weight after the fights. I stayed on my diet. Like, sure, I'd give myself 1 or 2 days to enjoy some stuff and whatnot.
Treated like a professional
exactly.
athlete
The finer things in life. And then it was, all right, we're back on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm probably the only regional athlete that took care of absolutely everything in my fight career now, because I'd learned off of Bill now. I'd spent the years now learning from Bill. I had the chance to learn from Luis Martinez now too. And then I had the chance to learn
Alex's
from Adam
dad.
Link, who's our wrestling coach, who a lot of people don't know, but the man's a gem in wrestling.
Yeah.
Well, you talk in the wrestling community around Canada, everybody knows who he is.
Yeah.
Just the average person doesn't know. So I have 3 phenomenal coaches that I have a chance to learn from 3 different styles of combative sports. And I get to take everything from them. And then on top of that, you got all of Bill's former guys like Kajan, and Johnson and some of his other guys. And you get tidbits from them too, with what they do with their diets. And you start playing with it and seeing how your body responds to it. And that's exactly what I did. So to a point where I almost basically had become almost a vegan, but I took care of everything. My own nutrition. I took care of my own meal prepping. I was doing all that. My own training I did by myself. Just because Bill was so focused with Alex and what we were doing, because Alex was starting to build up at that time. He was just signing with Brave and all that stuff. So that took focus. And I was mature enough to handle all this stuff. And like you said, I became very professional with the weight now. So when Bill finally gave the okay to go to 45, I remember we're at the last day. So we're doing our Tabata day, and he's asking all of us where our weight's at. And like, I got to fight at 145, weigh-ins are the next day type deal. And we're at Tabata's and I'm already at 145 pounds.
Wow.
And he's like, well, you really don't need to do a whole lot today, do you? We're like, nope. So I kind of got to skip out on the Tabatas a little bit. Like, I still went through the paces, but I didn't have to go through the pace like the guys did.
What is a Tabata, just for people listening or a podcast?
It's a real tense, fast workout. So it doesn't take long. Like it takes maybe, about 16 to 25 minutes tops. But you suit
high
up
pace.
And you're trying to, it's high
Break
pace
a
to get that engine going, to get that sweat going, because you're trying to get that last real good sweat in for the night before you hit the bed. And then morning you hit your weigh-ins. Granted, this is when we were still weighing in at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Now some promotions are starting to weigh in 10 o'clock in the morning, noon. So it changes the system a little bit now, right? So things have changed a bit, thank God. Not since I've retired. Hey, actually, my last fight, they did do that. I did almost mess up on my last fight. So my last fight at 45, I did have to cut weight, but it's because I ate breakfast that morning and I thought I still had another 4 hours to weigh in.
Right.
And I thought what was actually the official weigh-in was just a checkup on the scale. Turns out it was an actual official weigh-in. I was like, oh crap. So I cranked on the hot water in the tub, jumped in for 10 minutes, lost 3 pounds.
There you go.
Anyway, I go, but that's because my diet had become
exactly.
so clean.
And you were that close, right? And
Exactly.
it's a very, cutting 3 pounds when you've just spent 8 hours of hard cutting to soak all the water out, and then you're cutting 3 pounds versus being decently hydrated and trying to throw
fully, not even decently, I'm fully hydrated.
Yeah.
That's the thing that people didn't realize, is going down to 145, I was never dehydrated. I was always fully hydrated. Like my very first fight at 45, we actually almost had to pull out of that fight too. So ironically, after the weigh-ins, this is where I learned my final lesson with weight cutting, was don't sodium crash your body. Don't be a freaking idiot and start packing on more sodium than you should. It did the opposite. Normally you think, no more sodium with your liquids and stuff. You're replenishing, getting the electrolytes.
You're so out of everything that it's out of balance. When you just
it made my body go into full cramp. I went into full cramp.
Need some potassium in there.
No, that didn't even help, because I was always part of my weight cut kit always had bananas. I'd always have 2 or 3 bananas in there and stuff like that. I'd go to the cleanest water. I actually switched up to alkaline water. And even that first cut at 45, I was actually kind of semi-working with a scientist out of the United States that worked on the product was called 7.3 or 7.2, sorry, and that's our alkaline state. And it was an alkaline company. So we really worked with alkalining out waters and molecular hydrogen. So the supplement I took for that camp, it was the only supplement I took. No pre-workouts, no protein powders, no nothing. Everything that I took from 45 for proteins came through either chicken or vegetables or beans, lots of beans and stuff like that. Cause there's so many super foods that are beans. So a lot of those, but my main supplement was the molecular hydrogen. And what I found with that molecular hydrogen is when I got cleaned out my body to that point, and with the alkalining of the water, so I had alkaline my body out too, is my sweat was different. Like normally when we sweat, you feel kind of sticky and gross. I didn't feel like that. I felt like I just came out of the swimming pool almost.
Weird.
Like it just pours right out of you. Like I couldn't retain water per se. Like I could, but I couldn't. So it made it great for fighting because it was like, I don't have to go massive crazy to get a crazy workout. Like I remember one wrestling class we had done and I dropped 7 pounds on that wrestling class. Wow. Just because it was just pouring out. Granted, it was a hard wrestling class.
Yeah. But and wrestling's the hardest shit you can do.
And it's not like I was in heavy gear. I was in spats, shorts, and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
And you could just wring the sweat out. But it cleaned it right out. And it made the weight cutting so much easier. But also what I had done too with that is I also did what we call, so some of us would call it intermittent weight cutting. So every night to every other night, just depending on how much time I had in my schedule, I'd get home. And I also would use this as my recovery, is I would empty out my hot water tank, fill it right up, and then I'd boil two quarts or 10 quart pots, and I'd dump those in. So that's freaking hot water, and I'd jump in that tub for half an hour, and I'd sit in there, and I would probably lose an additional 5 pounds off of what I'd already had lost in training. But then the secret was you rehydrated 3/4 of that weight back on. And then you go to bed. So when you wake up the next morning, you still lost a little bit more from when you trained. So you're always losing and coming up and losing and coming up and losing.
And your body's getting used to letting go of the water
and slowly adjusting.
Yeah.
So it got to a point where that last, my last fight at 45, the entire camp, I was walking around at basically 51, 52.
Perfect.
And then same with when I got injured after my first fight at 45, and we were thinking this is going to be your last fight at 45, win or lose, you're dropping to 35 now. Because after I had won that fight against a guy named Mark Savoy at 45, I never got above 150. And I couldn't. My body would not put the weight on. So it was like, all right, we were already, the fight was supposed to be October. And this is where another reason why I can't stand this promoter that I thought was my friend too, is he canceled way too many cards for no reason. Like he put on a card one time with 5 fighters, 5 fights on the whole freaking card. He put that one on, but then he cancels other ones that still had more fights on it, which just blew my mind. It's like, why? You got the local guys. But his mind frame was, I need those big name draws in. We use the locals to sell the tickets so I can bring in the big name that nobody cared about.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. Like some of them, if they were the UFC caliber names that people had seen before, but if you weren't a regional fan that saw some of these lower, like the guys, Canadian guys get to the UFC but never made it big, they had a couple fights and then lost, nobody knew who they were.
And I'm a huge MMA fan. Like I'm obsessed. And I barely know the regional guys. Barely. Like there's a couple names that like I know from just like now I'm starting to watch like the unified shows and stuff. And I'm just starting to, but I am years and years in this journey. And like I am like literally searching for people to talk fighting. Like I would do this all day long if I could. I love talking fighting. And like I can tell how rare it is for someone to be at this level of fandom that I'm at, because I can't find those. Like I'm with my podcast now, it's nice because I can put out, like I always put stories up during the fights, and I've had a bunch of people that I didn't know were fight fans reach out to me, and they're really in depth and we've had some really great conversations. But it's not like there's this huge underground, like that's going to pack out a 10,000 man show at your regional promotion, right? You're doing this for the fighters, right? Any regional show, maybe down the States and maybe like over in across the pond, there might be some that are more in that middle ground. But really, if it's not the UFC, if it's not Bellator, and it's not, maybe Cage Warriors and CFFC's getting there, and I don't know. That's like really LFA. That's the other big one. That's the one I was missing, right? Like those are kind of the big dogs. And if it's not N1, N1. But like really, other than that, it's all for the fighters, and that's what's so unfortunate is like everything runs on money, right? Everything's got to make its own money, and you have to have understanding of that. But really, at the end of the day, anything below those leagues should all be just trying to move these fighters along and make a little bit of money on that. But if you make that above what you're doing for the fighters, you've got it all wrong, and it's going to be a failure in the long run.
And granted too, like me being the fighter, I can speak and have all these frustrations towards a promoter all I want, because I was on the other end. I was on the fighting end, right? Granted, I don't know necessarily all the schematics that go into promoting, but I got a really good inside line on that. Having Bill as my coach, man's done it all. Like, he's written the rules for MMA in Canada, for crying out loud. So I got about as good of a coach as you're going to get in this country for what we do, and on every aspect, not only on being a promoter, but becoming an official if I wanted to, with reffing or judging, because that was another avenue I looked at possibly doing too with retiring. And I still am looking at doing that.
We could use some judges. Holy shit.
Reffing's more my thing. I like reffing.
I have a bug
I like
too.
the reffing fight.
Yeah.
I like being right in there. I don't like that cage in my way. It drives me nuts.
Yeah. No, I've often thought that too, of like, man, I'd be a good, well, I don't know. I think commentating too is something that I'd like to do one day. And it's funny because, I don't know, my dad's one of the ones, because he's a fan of the sport, not super crazy, but just how much I've gotten into it the last couple of years. He always watches it with me. And it's funny how often I say something, oh, look out for this. And then 2 seconds later, Paul Felder, oh, look for this. And like, he doesn't know the words, but he always looks at me like, man, how do you know all this shit? I'm like, I'm just obsessed, dude. I just love this shit, right? Like,
when you're starting to understand the flow of fighting.
Exactly. And you can see stuff. Because I remember when I first started watching fighting, one of the coolest things I loved was Joe Rogan would always know when guys were going to throw spinning shit. He would always know. He'd always see their hips. Oh, look, he's looking to spin. And then a couple more. And then he'd spin. And I'm like, that is so cool. And you can kind of see it, but I wouldn't have noticed it if he wouldn't have said something. But now I'm noticing, like, oh, he's about to spin. Oh, he's looking for an elbow. Oh, he's looking for this. And it's like, I shouldn't know this. I've never fought anybody in my life. I should not have this, right? And again, I don't know shit. Want everyone to fully understand, I don't know shit. But like, it's nice to, have a little bit of confirmation about, well, I know enough to
talk about it.
I know enough to talk about it, right? And like, and that's a fun little, that's a fun little new level of fandom to get to. And then now adding it in with like the jiu-jitsu knowledge I'm getting, is like, oh, this is really fun to watch now, of like understanding, because that's one of the things that me and you talked about lots, just going to these private lessons, is how much one tiny change to a move makes the whole thing go, right? Like, you were showing me
just a pinky toe in the right place can change everything.
It's amazing. And you understand that, but like, and how many things are all happening at once. Like when I was doing, or when you're showing me on the first day, rear naked chokes, of like, you think it's all happening up top, but like half of it is your legs, you're pinching at different points. Like the way you're pulling, everyone thinks that you arch your back and pull them away, because like that's how they do it in movies, right? And then you show me like, no, just pull forward. And I just couldn't figure out how to like crunch it down and get it a growth squeeze. And then you said, all right, take that left elbow and pull that down. And everything changed. The whole thing just like sucked right up. Like, I think you could hear it in your voice. So you're saying, just pull it up. Like, I was like, oh, that's new. Right. Like, but like, it's just that one small piece of information. And not only am I loving learning it, and it's so much fun, and that stupid dummy I could literally sit at that gym all day and just do moves on this dummy. I want to buy one for the house because it's so much fun. But what I'm thinking of, like, even looking further ahead, is I feel like I'm going to love to teach jiu-jitsu one day if I can get good at it, because it seems like so much fun to be able to share that knowledge of just, I can change your whole move with one little piece of advice. Like, that is such a,
I think the biggest thrill for me when I teach jiu-jitsu to people is, especially when they're like, I can't do this, or I can't move that person, I can't take that person, and you show them stuff and they apply it and it works. And you see that look in the eye. It doesn't matter if it's this big macho bodybuilder or if it's this skinny little nerdy looking guy, just normal guy. I shouldn't even say nerdy truly, but just your normal looking guy, or just this tiny little girl who doesn't think she could do this. And it's like, but that's what jiu-jitsu is designed for.
It's exactly what it's for.
Where the trick to jiu-jitsu comes down to is when those big guys, strong guys, and even big strong girls out there too, because there's some, holy God, trust me, I've been hit by a few of them. And they'll change your opinion on things, trust me. But it becomes that issue when the big guys now know what you know, and now it becomes a battle of technique. And who's putting in the work. Now, granted, you being smaller, you're going to have to be a bit faster, and you're going to have better conditioning. You're going to have to deal with that size. So yes, the big person's always got a little bit of an advantage, but there's also a lot of disadvantages to those big guys too. There's lots of holes for you to escape.
For sure. And that's something, as a, someone that, before jumping into trying jiu-jitsu, has listened to so many ridiculous amount of hours of fighters and stuff. And like, I have so much institutional jujitsu knowledge that's not actual practical jujitsu knowledge of knowing it. Where was I even going? I just gave myself a huge compliment and forgot exactly where I was going with that. Anyway, shit, how embarrassing. What was I going to say with that? Going into it, not knowing what I'm doing. Anyway, fuck. Oh, this is what it was. It all came back to me. Going into it, I always heard about big guys and strength and how much shittier at jiu-jitsu they are because they don't learn technique, they learn strength. So going into this, I've always been of like, I really don't want to use my strength. I always want to be using the right technique. Like, right? Like one of the examples when I went to that class and I was rolling with that smaller guy that I said I was showing you that I got that armbar on him, right? And I could tell immediately as soon as we started rolling, I was like, oh, I'm vastly stronger than you. Like, I'm not trying to talk myself. I'm just a big dude, right?
Oh, you're strong, right? You're strong.
Like,
trust me, you're stronger than I am.
And but I knew that, so I was like, so the whole time I was rolling, I actually was like, I'm trying not to use my strength, right? Like I don't want, because there was times where like he was about to get me, and I just kind of grabbed him, like threw him over, and I took his back. I was like, that didn't feel very good. Like that wasn't technique. If this guy was any bigger, that wouldn't have worked. So I was just trying to do that. But it was so much fun. And I think also this is something I want to ask you about, of kind of your take on gi versus no gi from what I've experienced of just training now that I've finally done both and seen both sides of it. And I have a couple of things to say on it just from a fun perspective. But like, I'm curious, how do you know how much strength to use and how much, like, I feel like I'm struggling with it because I just don't know enough technique to know when I'm using technique and not technique, right? Like I'm still so new in it to get that. And also, how does this compare with that strength thing that we just talked about with gi and no gi? Because that's what I found with the gi. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. It was tons of fun. And I found, because at least, and I think it is because I'm a strong guy, is that it's less hopeless. In the no gi, it was like, not only do I not know what I'm doing, but it's so vast, of like the amount of not knowing what I'm doing is so vast that I don't even know what to do to even pretend that I'm making a headway. Whereas at least with gi, I could keep some grips and like, oh, you're trying to do this. I don't know if this is good or bad, or if you're moving yourself into a worse position or a good position, but I'm just going to assume you know more than me. And if you're trying to do something, it's bad, and I can defend against it. And I can try and use my strength, but like, I'm never trying to use maximum strength, but you're always using a little bit. And I just love that idea of like, it's a constant tension. As soon as that gi went on, it felt like less of like two beings kind of like grappling and more of, you are one. You're always locked on, and it's a power battle the whole time in between these moves and as you're getting them. And that added level, I found it so much more intellectual, and I found it so much more addictive.
It's actually funny you said that too, because I'm pretty sure I said this to you when we first started out, where I said I'm a better no gi guy than I am a gi guy.
Yeah.
And it's funny you said that, because like I find bigger guys actually prefer the gi.
Yeah.
Because you got something you can grab.
Yeah, I love that.
You're used to grabbing with your hands. And it's human instinct. We want to grab with our hands. No gi, grabbing with your hands isn't always the best thing, because now you're sweaty. You can only grab the body. You can't grab clothing. The only clothing you can grab is your own shorts.
Right.
You can't grab his shorts. You can't grab that. So you have to learn. And the way it was the best way for me to learn it is because early on in my jiu-jitsu days and grappling, I didn't necessarily know where to stick my hands, and having that a bit older, but that ego of, I want to be a champion. I wasn't letting you sweep me for the life of me. I was fighting for every inch. So I wasn't always putting my hands in the right places, and I dislocated and broke my fingers countless times, but I refused to stop training. I'd always still come up and train. So I'd have to learn how to grip without the hand. And if you watch the high level no-gi grapplers and stuff like that, they're not always grabbing with their wrists. They'll use their lat and the sides of the humerus bone, and they'll trap that down on the side. Now they'll trap a forearm, and they'll trap it up by the elbow. And now you have to try to pull from your elbow all the way to your hand to get that free. And that's a lot of friction you got to pull. Plus it's clamping down on you. Whereas when you grab by the hand, all you got to do is start twisting, and you can break away from that stuff fairly easy. Right. So the grips change, but also, me being a smaller guy now, this is where I favor the no-gi, is it's faster.
Oh.
Gi's slower.
Yeah. And, so maybe that's what I was enjoying, of just slowing it down, because it felt like at least it gave me a chance of like, in the no-gi, and again, like we talked about some other issue of just not being able to ask and not feeling comfortable enough to be in those situations. Maybe if I was a little bit more assertive and had done some of that, it wouldn't have been that way. But yeah, it just felt like it was so fast. Like if I was going with a guy that's good enough, it was just like, this seems boring for him, because he so clearly could just whip past me, get me into a position and tap me out at all time, that he's just wasting his time, and I felt bad for that. Whereas gi, it's like same thing could happen, but at least I can resist at every step of the way, and they're going to have to use their skill to beat my muscle, right? And I knowing that I'm not going to use my full muscle because they're going to beat me anyway, right? Like I learned that lesson very quickly.
Technique, strength.
It doesn't matter. I'm like
my hand just walking up by your elbow can walk your arm all the way up, and there's nothing you can do as strong as you want to be to pull that down. I'm gonna Uncle Fester you all the way up.
And in knowing that, it's okay. I really loved that it was definitely it's both A and B. A is, you know what, knowing I'm not going to use all my strength because they're going to beat me anyway. And B, it is so exhausting so quickly. And again, like this is what I'm talking about, this like institutional jiu-jitsu knowledge of knowing, like I knew going into it, it's a different kind of cardio. It doesn't matter I run 10 kilometers every day. That does not matter. You're going to get tired. And it was a different kind of tired that I haven't felt in a long time since like my hockey days. I'm like, oh, this is a different type of exhaustion. And the other side of it too is just that made me, instead of fighting with everything, it's like, I don't know how good and bad each of these positions is. And I'm just going to assume it doesn't matter. I'm going to get put into bad position. I'm just going to go with it, right? Like even with that littler guy that I was kind of checking out, at some point in the role, I was so tired that he went to I think, I can't remember what it was on, like maybe I was in his garden. He went to sweep me and it was like, I can tell he's using technique to sweep me. I could power this, but I'm just going to use it. I'm just going to fall back with this and just go with it and just take him into my garden and stuff. And like, it was such a cool lesson almost to learn of just like, I'm going to be so tired that it doesn't matter if this is a bad position. I'm just going to roll with it and try and do the best I can from each of these positions, because really the difference between me and being in a good position and a bad position is just you telling me that's a good position or a bad position, because I have no idea, right? So why get so caught up in all this stuff of trying to assert where I want to go? I don't know where I want to go, right? Like I don't really know this stuff. I'm just kind of guessing the whole time.
And the best advice I can give you is it's like going back. It's the old saying you've probably heard so many black belts and stuff around the world say it too. The most dangerous guys on the mats, guys and girls, are the white belts. It's because they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know.
Yeah.
Like my worst injury I've taken in grappling, and it just happened just recently, it come from a white belt.
Right.
Not that he did anything wrong. That guy didn't do anything wrong. It was
my
fault.
Hooks in.
I didn't put my hooks in. I was being lazy.
Yeah.
I was being lazy because like, it's a white belt. I know technically I'm far. I've got the techniques.
Yeah.
And where we are, I've got all the answers to what we're doing. And I made the mistake of not sticking my hooks in all the way, and I left my feet flared out. So I was riding his thighs, and I wasn't trying to flatten him out because that wasn't what I was trying to do. And he flattened out automatically on myself, and it caught my feet underneath of him. So my feet were flared out. And then he did the worst thing you could possibly do in that spot to a guy. He log rolled. And when he log rolled, I essentially heel hooked myself.
Yeah.
And that, knee just went, goodbye.
See you later.
See you later, you dumb. So that's where it's my fault, because I know enough in the sport to know I should not have put myself and was lazy there with him, because anything can happen.
Right.
So did he hurt me? Yes. But that was my fault.
Right.
And if I hurt him, it's my fault too, because I should be good enough to be able to control it. Even if he's going a little too hard, I should still be able to get him in a spot, even if he makes me angry, to have to control the spot. If we're grappling in class, hit the submission and then release instantly. And he's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
That's the proof of how good you are as a martial artist. If you're losing your cool and you're with a white belt and you're a higher ranked guy and you got lazy and you were stupid and you got yourself hurt or you got yourself caught in a submission, you don't have the right to go after that guy and I'll strangle him. And when he taps, continue to strangle, or grab an arm bar and he taps and you break his arm, for crying out loud.
Right.
You don't deserve that right, because you did it to yourself.
Right.
And that's the thing is, I'll tell all white belts, don't worry about where you're going right now. Because there's so much in jiu-jitsu, so much. Like I tell people, I've been boxing for years. Yeah, I'm still learning and stuff because things evolve. Kickboxing, same thing. And all the martial arts do evolve as they go. But the book's never been written fully on jiu-jitsu. No. There's not an ending yet. It's like myself, I've come up with a few things that Bill Mahood himself has never seen before. And the man's been around the sport forever. And he's never seen, like, I have a new variation of a twister that I do. He's dubbed it the moose knuckle.
There you go.
Because he thinks it's such a dick move. But it's when I'm in side control and you're on top of me, and it's more of an MMA position, but I'm worried about that top arm that's up by my face that's going to be cross-facing me. Also dropping elbows, hammer fists. I need to lock that arm up. I'm not so concerned about the arm that's towards my body. It's awkward for you to punch across yourself. You put yourself in a more vulnerable spot. I can get out the side now, and I can almost backdoor you in a way. So I worry about that arm, and I'll lock up a key lock Americana, depending on your style of jiu-jitsu, it's what you'll call it. And from there, I'll start cranking on it. Yeah, anybody that knows grappling, if that guy knows grappling, he's never going to get submitted there because he's going to move his hips or he's going to do something else.
Spin out.
But I'm going to get you to turn your hips. And as you turn your hips, I'm going to hip out now, and I'm going to reach over your back, and I'm going to hook that leg that's sitting there with my top leg, and I'm going to suck it in. Now you have to make a choice. And most guys, they don't realize it the first time I've put them here, is you have a choice. It's either you let go of my head and you let me get out to the back, and now I'm on your back, which nobody wants to happen, or you keep a hold of my head, not letting me get your back, but which you don't realize is all I'm doing now is just putting my arm around your head and just saying, thank you.
Yeah.
And there's my twister.
Yeah.
Is the easiest entry into the twister I have ever seen. And still to this day, I haven't seen one easier.
Yeah.
And I've hit just about everybody with it. And now I can't hit anybody with it because as soon as I'm in that spot and I grab the arm, they're like, nope, don't
Take
think
her back.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, now I'm getting countered on it too, which is awesome. Because
that's
now
perfect.
We're
That's how
evolving the game, right?
Yeah.
And it's forcing me to come up with different things too now. And it's like the Americana or the Kimuras and stuff like I was showing you. Like I've got so many different attacks off that Kimura.
Right.
Like my last fight, for example, everybody that knows me, as soon as I locked that Kimura on late in the first round, even though I got slammed, and I had that, everybody jumped and went, they thought the fight, I thought the fight was over too.
Yeah.
And that's another mistake on my behalf that I can pass on to the fighters.
Yeah.
Is never celebrate until the fight's done.
Until
Do
that
not
ref
do it.
tears you away.
Yep,
Don't
'cause
stop. Yeah.
I thought I had it, and then I slipped. The next thing you know, position's lost, and everything's changed, and now we're back in the fight again.
And mentality is so important while you're fighting. That 100% concentration. Even if you're a little think of like, I got this Kimura grip, like this is good for me. Even if that only knocks you from 99 or 100% concentration down to like 98 for that split second, that's all it takes.
Yep.
That is all it takes, right?
And for that split second, I'll admit, I guess you could say I mentally checked out of the fight per se, because it was like, this is over. In training, I get everybody. Nobody escapes this position.
Yeah.
And if I don't Kimura, I get you something else, triangle armbar, something's coming. And it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
That one-off thing that never happened, and I didn't have an answer.
But that's the type of lesson you can't get anywhere else.
No.
Of learning that thing, right? And the only way you can get that lesson is to be close enough with some, like there could be somebody that's an upcoming fighter that believes in you enough and you've done enough work that lesson will reach them where they can concentrate on that. But that's so hard. The difference of taking advice and experiencing something is so vastly different, and it's so hard for people, and there's so many things going on with their own egos and stuff for people to listen.
And especially in fighting too, because guys will look at records and they'll go like, well, you're 4-6. What the hell do you know?
Yeah.
It's like, 4-6. But I've trained under some of the best guys in this country and in North America.
Well,
and
you
I've
look
soaked
at
up the knowledge.
Look at buddy that I had on the podcast the other day, Aaron Jeffrey, who just fought on Contender Series from Niagara Falls.
And
his record,
he should be in the UFC too.
he should be, right? And
they even said he was UFC ready.
For sure, UFC ready, and I think he will be in the UFC, right? Like I think he gets a call any day. But when you look at his record, like so when he's coming on, I look at his record, and it's like, I think it was like 10-3, just after that third loss to Bio who fought, I think, again last
night. Knocked somebody out.
Did he? I haven't seen it yet. I've only seen the first two fights. I'll watch after this. Anyway, but like he lost to Sean Brady, who's now in the UFC dominating, right? And lost to who's the other guy? Another guy who's in the UFC who's on a really crazy win streak. So his two going into that Dana White Contender Series, which was a close fight, right? Like I think if that would have been a 4-round fight, he would have won that hands down, right? He had him pretty beat at the end, but he had banged 2 rounds anyway. But when you look at that record, that is a very, very different record. You have going into that fight, he had 2 losses, and they're to 2 guys that are doing that. Yeah. I don't know, right? And then and one of his wins was against that Andre Petrosky, who's just on the Ultimate Fighter for that season, was a pretty decent looking guy, right? And I think even got a shot in UFC past that, right? So he's gotten a shot and he beat that guy, right? So it's like, interesting. The only shitty thing is just a style like that's grind them out, that's hard, that's put a guy up against the fence, break them. It's not exactly what the UFC wants, right? And I think that is the only reason with the record, and that's the thing. That's why MMA records, it's such Swiss cheese, right? Because you know what? Like his record of like strengths of schedule, you could compare that with tons of guys in the UFC and show like this guy is a better catalog, right? Yeah. But styles and all that stuff and what the UFC wants, and that's unfortunate. And hopefully this is just the point that the game's at right now, and hopefully it evolves past that where they don't put a striker above a wrestler, but I think that's a long ways away. And I think there's a lot of other things like judging, like open scoring that are going to need to be addressed before we even get to that point.
Yeah, that open scoring, at first when I first heard about it was like, oh, that would be kind of cool. But at the same time, though, now that I thought about it as a fighter itself, it's like, I don't know actually how cool I would like to have that. Knowing going into the third round, like, man, I'm already down 2 rounds to nothing. But that could deplete a person
for sure. But also, I like the idea of it being told to the corners, and the corners can tell the fighter if they choose, because I think there's going to be fighters that don't.
If the corners have an idea, okay.
I like that idea. I think that's a better implementation. But even still, my big because when often with stuff like this, I like to take both sides to see. And my biggest argument is just the guys that know they have the first 2 rounds banked that are going to coast. Yeah. And I know as a promoter, as an organization, you don't want to see that.
No, but that's where the corner's job comes in. That's why you need to. I think in the past, this is where you see, especially coming up, guys make these mistakes. They're bringing guys in that they've never trained with to help corner, or they're bringing their buddy in. You don't bring your friends to war. Yeah. You bring the people with you that are going to get you through it.
Yeah.
One, for the victory, because it's a fight. But if I'm going to war, I don't care if you're my best friend. Yeah. You could be a complete dumbass when it comes to common sense. Yeah. I still love you, but your common sense is not.
You're not what I need to be.
Yeah. I ain't bringing you with me for this one. I'm sorry. And I kind of did that early in my career.
Yeah.
I did things like that.
And everybody's
later
different.
I started now, I'm bringing the guys that are available, that are going to get me the best chance to win.
Yeah.
Because I can't see everything going on. Plus, I'm in the fight. I'm not worrying about, did I win this round?
Yeah.
That's the one thing you never heard me. And I think Bill can even contest to this in my whole career. I never asked him, are we winning? Did I win that round? Did we lose that round? You even look, even in my last fight, you can tell by the time that fight, the round's done, I knew I didn't win the round because I'm shaking my head. I'm like, frick. I got taken down too many times. I was on my back. Even though I took no damage, I got up.
Yeah.
Every time, your 3 takedowns to my 1.
Yeah.
Even though your third takedown, I countered it into almost a submission finish. Still.
Yeah.
You still got me.
Yeah.
So I was like, God damn it. I need to pick it up.
Yeah.
But that's where you, as a fighter, and having a good corner can help you with that too. And I think if we bring in the open scoring, it can bring in the fact that you don't need to bring in the good
and it's just one more thing to add into that mental capacity of what's happening in that 15 or 25 minutes. There's so much shit. Adding any more variables into it is almost right. Like I think there's definitely some arguments, and that wouldn't be the place I would start with. Like if I had my magic wand to fix the way I see the problems in MMA, that's not where I would start. Right.
First place I would start is, I don't give a crap where you are in this world. You run an MMA event, the rules are the same, clear across the board.
First, easy.
I cannot stand this. We're running the unified rules, but we didn't adopt the grounded opponent rule. That's not unified rules then.
No shit.
It's not a unified rule. Do not call it the unified rules, because you're not the unified rules.
So stupid. And the fact that these fighters are this still blows me away to this day, that like, I just think that if I'm a fighter, just knowing and it's always tough to put yourself in your shoes. Like, it's hard for me to put myself in a fighter's shoes, because clearly I'm not a fighter. I don't have that. I don't have whatever that is. So the whole thing's just foreign to me. But like, I thought, if I just some sort of weird circumstance, I have a fight upcoming, and it's in, say, Atlantic City. Yeah. Just throwing something out there. I am going to be looking at those rules so far in advance to make sure I know that. But you still hear these guys that just talk about just
Peter Yan.
Peter Yan. It's the best example.
As much as I can't stand Aljo for what he did. I was an Aljo fan, truly.
I was a huge.
His biggest mistake was letting those photos with him and that belt come out.
100%.
And you shouldn't even be gloating that you're the champ just because of how you won. Yeah. Except that you got the belt. Okay,
for
definitely.
Sure. The way he won it, the way he was kind of like putting it down. So I was honest, and I was saying, like, this is such bullshit. I
should have done what Justin Gaethje did. Just drop the belt off. No. I want the real one.
Exactly. And
because myself, I wouldn't feel like that's the real one.
Exactly. And that's what he's saying. And in his defense, he's saying, you know what? I went out, I had all my friends around my family. We went out, and they were trying a shitty situation that was not my fault. Buddy kneed me in the head when I was clear on my knees. The ref said like 3 times.
Exactly.
Right? So not my fault. And they're saying, you know what? This wasn't your fault. Celebrate. Be happy you just won the belt, and force them to take those pictures. And then they got put out, and it's like, Okay, I'll give you that even, because that was the same thing. Still to this day, huge Aljo fan. I've been following since he was, didn't have a bed when he was staying in New York with Ray Longo's. Like, I've followed this guy forever. Really big fan of the guy. Think he has a huge heart. All that said.
Didn't like that he left Matt Serra behind either.
Didn't like that either. But again, when I heard him back it up and his reasoning, it seemed pretty reasonable. I was like, oh, I can see that too. Clearly, if it's a guy that you've had that kind of relationship with, make sure you don't hurt his feelings like that. That's family
That's
to
the guy that brought you though to that shot.
Exactly, right? So even if you do have really good reasoning for it, it's up to you to make sure that his feelings are managed within that, right? And obviously you're getting your first title shot, a lot going on. I'll give him a pass for that. What I can't give him a pass for is when guys like Ariel Helwani came out and said exactly what I just said of like, I think this is bullshit. This is not his fault. The one thing I didn't like is him coming out with the pictures after. And he took that as if people are attacking him, and he went back at them and was like, and tried to create all this, and almost went full Cejudo, where just, well, fuck everybody, nobody's on my side. And it was like, no, so many people like myself, like Arrow was saying, like, no, we're on your side. That was complete bullshit. There's just one thing we didn't agree with. And he could have just addressed like, yeah, sure, the pictures didn't come out, like I'm still that. And it would have been a complete different, but he doubled down, and he still seems to be doubling down with it and is trying to ride out this new persona of this. But
for me, he could try to explain himself all he wants on that. I'm a loyalty guy.
Yeah.
And the fact that you had a man that brought you all the way to that opportunity and you left him behind, lost me right then and there.
Yeah.
And then to turn around,
and for it to be Matt Serra too, who's so lovable.
And that's why, like, I'm so easy to turn on Cejudo with this whole Cejudo and Moreno beef going on now too.
So I don't get, so what you mentioned that while we're rolling, so Moreno used to train with Cejudo.
So before Moreno was in the UFC and even on the Ultimate Fighter show, Cejudo had brought him in to train with him and all this stuff. I think even helped had him help him get ready for DJ, I think too, and a couple other fights. But they got so close that from what I was reading and stuff too. Granted, I don't know either guy personally, right? But reading and stuff like that, because Moreno, I guess, just responded. I think it was early yesterday, and kind of came back with some stuff, and was saying that, like they were tight. Henry brought him in, let him stay at his house, even paid for his food, paid for his wife to come up and stay with them and stuff like that too. So he really thanked Henry, really cared about Henry. And then they got to the Ultimate Fighter show, Henry versus Benavidez, and Henry has the opportunity now to take Moreno, and Henry shafts him and takes somebody else, and Joseph takes the opportunity and snatches him up.
Wow.
Show ends. Henry's got his title fight. Henry leaves Moreno behind, and even picks up Figueiredo to help him. Joseph Benavidez gets a fight, and he takes Moreno with him to help him prepare for the fight. So Moreno goes with him, and then I think it was Benavidez and Cejudo fought, and that's where just this beef ends up coming from. And now Cejudo's like, you're a traitor, and it's like, no, sorry, Cejudo. At the end of the day, you're a traitor, and you just need to shut your mouth. You're a great fighter, you are, but you will not beat out. You will not be.
I don't think
Volkanovski.
So. But I think that's a wicked fight.
For you to even think you could beat George St. Pierre, are you that mental?
I think that's just
You've got little man syndrome, dude. You don't even have the credentials. Your Olympic gold medal doesn't mean nothing compared to what that guy accomplished.
Yeah.
You won your belts. You didn't defend your belts, really. I don't think you actually defended either of them.
You defended the 135 against Marlon Moraes, who's a broken man at that point.
Yeah. So you basically Conor McGregor the divisions. Shut your mouth. Move on with your life.
Yeah. And not only that, like everything you just said was correct, but the way he went about it, that was my biggest thing of like, I struggle to not like anybody at that level, because I'm such a scrub myself and I'm such a fan of the sport that who am I to say anything about any of those guys, right? If you step in for one amateur fight, you got me beat. Fuck, you know what? I can't say shit to you. Having said that, if there's one guy who I've really struggled to enjoy, it's Henry Cejudo. And in fairness to him, he won me over. Just none of his antics. I still hated everything he did, everything he tried to do on that side. I really didn't like it, but he was just so fucking good in the cage that it was like, you're undeniable. As much as I don't like how you are and how you act, I can't say shit about your skill set. You are that good, right? And he is that good.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do himself any favors. You'd think, like, what I was hoping was that it was, and I think I hope this with Colby Covington, I think it has been a little bit of like, just, I need to put this persona on just to get me out of the obscurity, to separate me from the pack. And I will give anybody a pass, because prize fighting is so hard. The UFC
behemoth to try and rise to the cream of the crop. And that is so hard. I can't blame you for taking some things, but eventually he should have started to switch that off and to let his skills speak for himself. And he never did. He doubled down on the antics, got crazier with it. And it's
that's,
just
and that's the thing I don't think these guys realize is I want to believe that's the one thing that I got known for my career is I was humble. I was always respectful, win or lose. I always would come over. Even when I'd win, sure. Yeah, he'd be like, yeah, run. You'd be like, like, I think my last one I ran and went to jump up the cage and it was just like, nope, come back down. Did my little and right away went to go check on the guy and be like, whoa, let him know, like, it was actually an honor to fight you. You were fighting 10 years before I even fought.
Yeah.
So it was an honor to actually fight you. Like, thank you for accepting this fight, even though you came to my hometown and I kind of had things to lose right now. But no, thank you for taking that. And even my last fight when Josh Kwiatkowski TKO'd me, as soon as the buzzard stopped spinning in my head, and I was like, okay, I'm good. I got up. I looked at the ref. I'm good. And in most cases, the refs and the officials will not let two fighters come together as soon as a fight's done. They left me alone and let me walk clear over to the center of the cage. He was down on his knees. I knelt down next to him and we gave each other a big hug in the center of the cage. Yeah. Because I've made my career off of being that guy. Like there was the one fight I had, which was my first pro win, where there was some animosity. My opponent ended up getting suplexed by the ref after he came to, after I choked him unconscious. But that's because the idiot showed up. Oh God, I think it was 20 minutes late to the weigh-in. So I had to, after already weighing in now, before I could really fully replenish and eat, I had to sit around and wait for the photos and all that. So I was getting pissed off. And then for him to show up at the weigh-ins, and I'm like, okay. And I put my hands up for the picture and he comes up and he gets right in my face. And like, he honestly gave me the impression like he was going to kiss me. The way he was like moving his head side to side, like trying to get in. And then all of a sudden, what I didn't realize is he was weaseling himself over so that the commission people, the cameras and everything couldn't see it. Only the promoter's head was there to see it. He got to the side and he fed me a little headbutt. And he fed me the headbutt and then he pushed me and I pushed him back. And I remember he started coming at me and I just laughed at him. And I was like, save it for tomorrow, buddy. I was like, because trust me, you're going to sleep tomorrow. That's the last time you touched me was today. And then in the fight, we slapped hands and I stupidly touched his glove. I shouldn't even have touched his glove, but that's who I am. And touched glove and he kicked me right off the start. And I was like, oh, okay. You want to play that game? And then being the idiot he is, he thought he'd get away kicking me again. And I kicked his foot back and I broke his foot. And then from there, I pressed him against the cage, took him down. And then I hit him with, it's a power guillotine is what it was, but they also call it a sneaky ninja choke is what they call it. And within,
you have to show me that one next time.
I think within 5 seconds, he went to sleep. And it was one of those sleeps, like it was the delayed reaction where he was like, he looked like he's awake and he started to like a snake when it's dying, quivering down. And that's where I was a little bit amped up from everything. And I stood over top of him and I said, don't you ever fucking touch me again. And the ref was like, oh, back up. And I backed up. And then I guess me yelling must have snapped him out of it. And he sprung to and he started trying to come at me. And the ref had to grab him around the waist and was trying to stop him. And I drifted to the other side of the cage and he kept flapping his mouth at me and calling me on. I was like, bring it on. Like, I'll dust you up right now. Like, I trained the last 8 weeks to hit you and I didn't even really throw a punch. So come on. And that was the worst part is if I was able to come back to fighting, that's one guy I would have loved to have fight, even though no commission in the world would ever sanction that fight because he chose to run his mouth about a year ago saying that I ran away from him and I'm scared of him and all this, even though he came into our gym 3 years ago and I beat the holy hell out of him. And this is after I injured my neck. And I beat the living crap out of him. I was like, you still want to run your mouth? Like, you're an idiot, dude.
Some guys, it's just in them. Some guys got to get a hit.
I guess that's what happens when you spend more time sticking stuff up your nose and you do training in a gym.
I guess so. Hey, I guess so.
Yep.
Yeah. Good thing we don't have to deal with that bullshit.
Exactly. Hey? Those guys are getting weaned out of the sport.
Yeah. Slowly but surely.
Yeah.
In terms of just yourself as a fan of the sport, how much do you get to watch? I know we kind of started off by talking about boxing. Do you, I guess I'll start off here. Do you find yourself watching more MMA or more boxing these days? When you can?
Definitely hands down still MMA. MMA? It's still MMA just because everything I do is based around MMA.
For sure.
I like to say in north of Edmonton anyways, I like to say I'm the first hybrid striking coach where I can teach you boxing. Like, I can teach boxing. Will I take you to a WBC title? Probably not. But I can take you far enough to bring you to somebody who can take you somewhere else.
And give you the
so I can give you the fundamentals,
yeah.
and what I've always been known for was footwork and the way I cut angles.
Yeah.
So I can help you with that stuff. Get you your fundamentals, and then get you to somebody who can really take you far.
Can refine,
kickboxing, I believe I can take somebody far with kickboxing. I understand kickboxing very well. I understand angles, how to break the body, but defensively too. I'm very good defensively. Yeah. And then MMA. I believe I'm one of the first MMA striking coaches, if not in all of Alberta. Because you look at most striking coaches and the fundamental base was boxing, or it was kickboxing, or it was Taekwondo, or Muay Thai. I did all of it.
Yeah.
And I get to bring it all in. And now Taekwondo is being added into my repertoire with Master Martinez and stuff.
Yeah.
With Alex Martinez's dad.
Yeah.
So
I follow him on Instagram and stuff.
And the guys, when you think about it too, like people are, Taekwondo. Yeah. Like how good can this person be? This guy is so good.
Talk to Wonder Boy.
Well, exactly. But this guy is so good that he took his just the local club to the world championships of Taekwondo and finished, I believe it was second. It might have been third, but I believe it was second in the entire world. They lost to the Argentinian team, the national team. They lost to, and they're a club team.
Really?
He also coached the team for the Canadian team that beat the Russians in sparring. I think that was the first time we beat them in sparring as youths, and Ian Stobie was a part of that team.
Yeah.
Like that's just the caliber, and Luis is a big part of Ian. So is Bill, but Luis is a big part of
And doesn't Ian have
a
big fight coming? I follow some of these Instagram pages that just kind of highlight.
We're trying desperately to get him a fight.
Oh, did it fall through?
Yeah, it fell through. Yeah, the commission down on the reserve that was going to put it on down by Calgary decided very last minute that now everybody needed to be fully vaccinated. Before it was just you needed a proof of negative test. Now everybody in the building needed to be fully vaccinated.
That's bullshit.
Yep.
And that's the thing that gets me is like where the rubber meets the road on some of this stuff. Yeah, all these vaccinated stuff. You can go into a restaurant or something. These guys' dreams, these guys' careers, like, and it's so hard to get a fight and for all this stuff to fall apart on such stupid theater. God, that pisses me off.
The stupidness of it all too is there's now granted it's rumors. Who knows if it's 100% true? But lately it seems like in the last year and a half, rumors have been the truth. But rumors are even circulating that I don't know about the rest of the country, but AHS themselves are starting to look at now where if you're teaching classes through Zoom calls, you got to be vaccinated too. So it's like, what? We can catch a virus through a camera now? Like, how does that make any sense?
None of it's made.
Not. It's all power. It's a complete power grab.
Yeah.
And if people can't open their eyes to that now, then I'm sorry. You should probably move to China.
It's not even. But that's the thing of like you almost got to keep compassion with those people because like when you look at all the billions of dollars put towards keeping their eyes shut and feeding them this information, it's hard to judge people for that. Is. And yes, it's easy to be frustrated because when you do see it, it's so obvious. It's hard to hold compassion for people that don't. But I think it's hard for us to put ourselves in a situation where we've ever been that blind and could take on, like, it's hard to sit there and take all this scariness information because we see through it a little bit. But if you put yourself in that position where that is all landing and you're getting freaked out by all this stuff, it's a little harder for me to blame them.
In fairness, maybe I might get in some trouble for this because I don't really speak my real true opinions on this very often, just because
this is the place to do it.
I'm very much Darwinism in the sense, the survival of the fittest. Like I was born to a 16-year-old mom in the 80s. I didn't have money. We were poor. I got picked on by so many people just because I didn't wear Nike shoes and Adidas clothing and all that stuff. Once I got to high school, it was a different story at that point. But by that time, my path was already picked on by these bullies. Granted, I'd whooped most of their asses to stop the bullying because enough was enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't have that. But growing up, what's happening today for me, I saw the writing on the walls. It's in history. You watch history, like you have all these people, granted, maybe referring to what's going on in the world today as the same as what happened in Germany with the Nazis might not be the right term to use because everybody wants to go, the millions and millions of Jewish people died during that. It wasn't just Jews that died too, guys. There was lots of other people that did die too. It wasn't just Jews. So let's not forget that.
It was political.
Very much was political, but they didn't just all of a sudden have the Nazis take power and they just started killing people. This took many years, like 6-7 years before it started.
And
so they had to snatch power.
Dehumanizing groups,
turning each other on each other, de-weaponizing the population so we can't defend ourselves.
And it's not just Germany, it's Russia, it's China. It's before every major atrocity.
Exactly. Every time there's been a major change in government, and especially not for the good, that's what's happened.
Yeah, they burn the books, they silence the speech, they compel things. That's exactly what happens. And that's where people, I can see the counter argument to say, well, this is a different situation, right? And to try and say that, like, well, sure, I see that too, but I don't think you can discount the echoes of history that we've seen.
And that's where I have my issue is because I'm just a grade 12 guy. Got my grade 12. I'm a fighter, for crying out loud. I'm supposed to be the big dumb idiot that gets punched in the head and hits his head all the time, blah, 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 blah. And you've got all these university degreed people out there that are just living in absolute freaking fear of what's going on. And it's like, you're the ones that spent almost $100,000 to go to university. You're supposed to be so much more intellectually intelligent than I am. But you're so goddamn ignorant to history. And history is what controls everything.
Yeah.
Science,
it's all good.
Science, they're like, don't question the science. Don't question the science. Science is meant to be questioned.
That's
science is not
works.
truth. Science isn't truth. It's meant to be questioned. It's always evolving.
And it only works if you're able to question it.
History happens and you can't change history. It's there. It's like people trying to say, well, the Canadian government, it would never do stuff like this to us. It wouldn't try to harm its own people. 1996, last residential school closed, people. Also, your current prime minister, his father was in charge for quite a long time and helped funded those schools to become more.
Yeah.
He wanted to help take the Indian, the savage out of the Indian. Very much so he wanted that. So
and it's very well documented.
Apples don't far fall from the tree.
Right. But when you say that of like there's all these university people that are supposed to be intelligent, I went to university. I got to see what it was. It is not teaching people to think.
It's indoctrination.
It's indoctrination. That's what it was through and through. And to the degree I always thought that, but I didn't realize how bad it was till I experienced myself. I was like, holy shit, this is ridiculous. Like I got to watch decently intelligent people become dumber as they went through and just take
people don't realize university is nothing but a business. It's nothing more than a business. That's why they sell tuition. They do all those things. It's just a business.
And the professors that are teaching it have never worked in the real world. They just went to school and they came back for it. And then they write a textbook that they can sell for $300 a crack with 100 kids a semester that have to come through and are forced to buy the book. It's the biggest racket I've ever seen.
Well, it's like I've proven it time and time again when it comes with health and nutrition. It's like you get all these personal trainers and you'll get certified. And so I've even said it. So you have these certificates that people get, diplomas, certificates, however you want it, but in everything. I don't understand either.
No, it's my phone.
But so you have all of this. But it's like, okay, well, you got your certificate. Who certified the person who certified you? Who certified that guy? Who certified him? Now let's get right to the very first person that certified anybody. Who certified that asshole?
Helio Gracie.
Who certified him?
Exactly.
Oh, right. Nobody. So it's an opinion. It now becomes that person's opinion, and everybody just chose to believe it and not really take it further and try to discover something else. Like my wife, for example, love her to death. Granted, I'm sure if we could get along easier when it comes to training and stuff like that, she'd probably really use me a lot more. But I'm very, like don't be foolish. Don't go off what you're doing because you're going to hurt yourself. You get these trainers now, because there's so many personal trainers out there. You go take an online course, you become a personal trainer. It doesn't mean you know anything about health and fitness. Oh, you knew a little bit about food, but you get all these trainers, and like I tell them, they're like doctors. Doctors aren't looking to truly heal you. They're looking to create lifelong clients. When you got to keep coming to see them and they got to keep pulling out that prescription book, they get paid. That's why we had an opiate crisis. Because we'll just write these opiate, boom, 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 and let's just chuck these out. Because they were getting paid to put this out there. They were collecting extra money for doing it, plain and simple. They can say they weren't all they want, but let's see all the paper trail, guys. Don't go hide any of it. Don't go burn anything. Don't go delete anything. Let it all show. And I'll bet you anything, somebody can follow the trace to find out where that money went. Big Pharma paid North American governments and politicians, not just in the United States, but in Canada, upwards of $151 million, and they don't know who collected any of that money.
There's so much that goes with that. There's so much like backing up to the opioid crisis, which I think is the best place to look at. And that's what's frustrating right now with seeing everyone
that is singing the praises of these pharmaceutical companies, that it is proven that they knew what they were doing with the opioid crisis. They budgeted it in that they're going to take some lawsuits from this because of what they're starting. They budgeted in, well, if we think we're reasonably are going to lose, $200 to $300 billion in court in a settlement, as long as we make $400 to $700 billion, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we'll take the lawsuit.
We'll take the lawsuit, which
exactly.
is, and that's what I'm saying. Of like, these are the same people that are now being sung the praises of
Pfizer,
right? Like, and they sponsor all these TV shows, all these news networks. They sponsor political partnerships, both sides, right and left. It's very scary.
Right and left are the same. They're intermingled together.
Yeah. And I've been saying this. The reason I'm not jumping fully into it with you is because I have beat this subject to death on this podcast. Because I'm so mad about it, and I've seen this stuff, and like this was stuff that was long. Oh, okay. I let the dog off the leash just thinking she'd be nice, but now she's right back into just bugging Randy. And that's the thing. Like, I agree with you with all this. I mean, we bullshit a little bit in the classes, right? Like, I've seen all this stuff, and that's a big thing with when you bring up history. Is that's what I've been doing. Dan Carlin's Hardcore History podcast. That's like my go-to. I love it, right? And I'm re-listening to like the first, 50 episodes or whatever. And the one I just went through, and I don't know if I'd skipped this on the first time, but it was a 5-part series on the fall of Rome. The fall of a civilization, and it is scary how similar.
Worst thing that's ever happened to human history, and all of human history, what we've dating back now to 400,000 years, we're finding humans around. Roman Empire is the worst thing that ever happened to human history.
And the best thing,
the agricultural revolution.
Yeah, like and it's all a viewpoint. It's all. I mean, Rome gave us some amazing things, but they also gave us some. And like honestly, what was most eye-opening to me was not even what they gave us or what they did, was just seeing human nature within that political. It was the first political, and how much it mirrors corruption. Exactly, corruption,
Disgusting.
power, and how close we are to the same. It's the exact same things happening now that was happening then. Did she bite you? Hey,
coach, that was a good one. That was a good one.
What the hell? Yeah, she got me good on the thumb here the other day.
Yeah,
I was
harder
just
than
leaking.
some pro fighters.
I know, a little freak. But something I definitely want to get to, because it kind of was going in within when you're talking about, how you could coach jiu-jitsu and coach all these things, and there's different striking coaches. Dog, enough. Ay. Yeah, no shit. Like, what do you... Yeah, here's your squeaky toy. Don't squeak it too loud, because you're going to... Almost took Randy's head off with that. So it's by your ear. But I'm just curious about... And I know I might be setting you up for this because we talked about it this morning, but the different mindset and the different viewpoints on combat jiu-jitsu versus sport jiu-jitsu. And I just kind of get your thoughts on it, and then I have a couple things on it that I'd like to ask you about.
Definitely. So maybe I could be all out to lunch, and there probably would be people that may listen to this podcast and be like, oh, this guy's an idiot and doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm just going off my own experience.
Yeah.
There is fairly significant difference between IBJJF sports style jiu-jitsu and your combat EBI jiu-jitsu, MMA jiu-jitsu, and street jiu-jitsu, which is what jiu-jitsu is. Self-defense first and foremost. The prime example is in a tournament in general. You don't have to worry about getting hit. So you can put yourself in positions and go after things and not have to worry about getting elbowed in the face, getting kneed in the head, getting hammer fist in the face, getting picked up and slammed on your head, because you can't pick up and slam in jiu-jitsu. You got to be nice in the sense, right? So even though it does still happen, but...
You little freak.
Yeah. So you put yourself in different positions. So how I would set up an armbar per se with my gi in a competition is different than how I may set up an armbar in an MMA fight, because I've got to worry about different variations now. So like you see a lot in jiu-jitsu, for example, I think the one I showed you this morning, is guys will grab a hold of the sleeve and they'll pendulum over and throw the legs up and underhook that opposite side leg to go up for that armbar. And now they've got some to anchor onto, and there's nothing you can do. You're fighting the balance. Whereas in street jiu-jitsu, MMA, beautiful. I'm gonna block that down, and I'm gonna start hammer fisting and elbowing your face off, because you've left it wide open. You've now just taken one of your hands and you've occupied it, and I still have two free hands. Granted, you are controlling one wrist, but I can still elbow you with that hand.
Yeah, like when I
have one free hand.
When you were showing it to me, you just said, like, you didn't even say like this is combat versus. You just said like I'm gonna go for this armor, and you said like, what do you notice when I tuck my elbow in here? And I just look like I have my one arm, but I had my left arm. I just started like mimicking elbows. You're like, exactly, right? Because like the way you just set yourself up, which in sport jiu-jitsu, that's perfect. But the way you're sitting there, I could have elbowed your face into mincemeat, right? Like obviously you would have let go. But
in fairness, if we didn't have such thing as sports jiu-jitsu, we wouldn't have things like the berimbolo. Nobody in their right mind is really going to pull that off. And granted, I love
even the
Ryan.
heel hooking.
I love Ryan Hall. Love Ryan Hall. But look at how much it failed for him.
Yeah.
Didn't succeed at all.
And
I was heartbroken.
I'm such a Ryan Hall stan that I just want to like.
I wanted him to win the fight.
I wanted him to win the fight too, and I feel like the thing I don't like about talking about that one with people is definitely I'm biased, and I'm coming at this as a point because I'm a huge Ryan Hall fan, and I'm a huge fan of him in and outside of the cage. Like I think he's just one of those people that if you take his fighting career away, he'd be someone that I would love to have on this podcast just because he's a fascinating mind, right?
Smart.
He's another guy like the John Donhers for also hobbies, right? He's just hyper intelligent. But the thing I didn't like about that last fight was I thought it was great and he was doing what he kind of had to do. Certain things happen, and I think the outcome paints his game plan, and it's easy to look back at it and go like, what an idiot, he shouldn't have been doing this. But I think one zag doesn't zag there, and I think that either that doesn't get finished like it got finished, and that fight plays out with that fight, and that was a stalemate. He might have still lost that decision, right?
But a question that we have to ask Ryan Hall though is how much sparring did you do with a broken hand? Because he broke his hand in that fight, right?
Right.
And if you remember, so that brings me back to earlier in that podcast where I say you get guys who will break a bone or they get injured and whoop, they don't train no more. They're gone. Nope. I keep training through my injuries, and if I can't physically train, I'm on the mats watching and I'm mentally training,
right?
Going through things, visualizing what's happening.
For sure.
Because for me, with our guys, we're so competitive with each other because most of us, our core group of guys, like you look at a team of like 20 on the team, most of us, almost 50% of us are purple.
Yeah.
And lots of people see our picture like, holy man, it's a lot of purple. It's like, because we've all been together for a long time. Right. That's where we've had a hard time growing our program, is because we've been so core grouped together and we're all been
your
beating the living hell out of
Yeah.
each other for years that we haven't been able to bring in new guys because the intensity was always so crazy because all four fighters now.
That's why you guys are bringing in a ringer with me now.
Well, yeah, sure. No, most of us are just now retiring now. We're moving on in our lives. Other guys are like, nah, it's just not for me, or I'm too injured to keep doing it, or I've just moved on to something else.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, which is just life in general. So now we've went from having 15 active fighters down to like 4 guys, 5 guys. And so most of us are now, like myself, I'm switching up my roles now. Now I'm not the fighter. I'm more of the coach. I'm the senior citizen on the team per se.
And how do you enjoy that role switch? Is it something like, it's obviously new when you're settling into it, but are you getting maybe not the same enjoyment that you got of being that fighter? Or are you finding new ways to enjoy it as the coach?
I'm enjoying life.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying life more. That's the biggest thing. I like growing up my first kid, I'll openly admit it. I have so many people who say, like, oh, you're a good dad and you're a really good dad. I don't feel like I was a good dad. So hopefully I don't even get emotional talking to you about this one because it does bother me. I was just so focused on the goal and trying to make it, because myself growing up oilfield town, I always knew I was different. I was like, I'm not meant for your typical 8 to 5. I've got nothing wrong like against working 8 to 5. That's basically what I do now, 7 days a week with what I do. But I didn't want to be that guy where you show up to work and you're on the end of a shovel, or you're on a hammer, or you're on the tape measure today. And that's all you were doing every single day. There was no progression with maybe I might get a raise once a year. Oh, maybe somebody might quit and I get moved up the ladder. So I just,
not really testing yourself.
Yeah. It's not enough. It's too boring for me. And I'm the type, when I get bored, I self-destruct. I'm start mentally self-destructing, physically self-destructing too. So I always got to keep challenging myself. What's that next challenge? What's the next challenge? How can I be better? And for fighting, that's how it was, and trying to get these goals down, but also knowing that I only had a very small window, and I had to take every opportunity that I could. So I worked odd jobs, basically put my family in the same situation that almost I was in growing up, where versus luckily we're not having to do welfare and all that, but it got to paycheck style living, and then we budget everything where we're being wise. But now I'm not fighting, and then COVID hit, of course, too. So, and we have 3 kids, so it's a little harder for the wife to get free. So it's a little bit more on me now too, but I have that freedom. I don't have to worry about, I got to get this training session in today, and then I have to get the second one in later on tonight, and then I got to get home and I got to hit recovery so I can get up again in the morning and do this again, and then I got a meal prep and all that. I have none of that anymore. Now it's just I worry about what I got to teach, who I'm teaching, or if I have a fighter that I'm working with, what are we game planning for?
Yeah,
and we'll go through. Granted, when I am cornering a guy for a fight, I do kind of. My wife might even say I do tend to almost fall back into how I was as a fighter. I'm watching tons of tape because I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for little things.
And it's that mindset too. And I think that's the biggest thing when you were talking about earlier about like who you bring into your corner with them. Listen to a lot of these people fight of like, oftentimes it's too, and again, going back to that George St. Pierre book, and again, I can bring it back again of when you're talking about like the benefit you get of watching. That was huge in that book of George when he blew his knee out, of how much progression he saw just going to the gym every day and just watching instead of being a part of it, of like how much he could pick up with that.
I've become more technical myself.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Like there's so much that goes into this that you don't realize. And there's so much time constraints too. Like as soon as you said that about like being a father while you're doing, there's so many things you can't do. And even bring it back to earlier about talking about weight classes. How many guys do you hear about that talk about when they get into the UFC and they say, well, I'm finally in the UFC. I can finally drop to my right weight class. Because there's guys who like should be fighting at 45, but the financial and like the requirements of you need to be treating it 24 hours a day like you're a professional, right? Yep. Professional nutrition, professional everything. You can't have a part-time job and do that, right? And there's guys like, or
if you get the right part-time jobs.
For sure.
Or like what you bring back to is not being afraid to humble yourself to wash the mats down after every class, to maybe work out, getting yourself free membership at your local gym or something like that.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of guys that they're too good for that, especially in today's mind frame. And I hate to bring it up because sometimes I still get dubbed in that millennial stage, even though I believe I'm just outside of it truly. But with the millennials coming up, like, oh, I'm too good to do that.
Right. And I think, and honestly, to me, if that's your issue, I don't think you're ever going to make it in the first place, right? Like
you're here for the wrong reasons.
And that's where I'm saying of like where I get it too is I think what I'm speaking about the elite of the elite at these guys, like if there's a way to make that weight
they're going to make it.
They're going to make it, right?
It was like me having to go to 45 finally and then potentially 35, which would have been my UFC weight.
Exactly.
And if you had a picture of me right now, you'd probably not believe that I was going to drop
when you
to
say
35.
you're going to go 35, that's crazy to me. Like that.
If anybody knows, I have a picture of another regional fighter, but his name was Rick the Ginger with the Intent to Injure Pfeiffer.
That's a great name.
Great name. Solid. That name got him so much popularity worldwide when we were amateurs too. Very good friends with the guy. He's almost like a brother growing up. But he was a 135er. And all of our friends knew us back then, and I was a 200-pound guy back then. And even now, they see the picture like, holy frick.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, he got pretty fat. But in that picture, we're both maybe 150 pounds.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're just training on a normal day.
And I think that's some guys, right? Like, it's also just the variability of your size compared to the weight classes are arbitrary. Like the way we decided this is going to be 45, 55, right? 70, 85. That's all very arbitrary. You might be a guy where you can, like, it takes a lot for you to get to 55, right? But you have to work really hard and like everything has to go right. And maybe you're still small for 55, right? But you'd still be a decent, right?
That was my problem.
Exactly.
That's why if you look at my record, I don't have a single win at 155. But you look at outside of Tom O'Connor, the 155ers I fought, all 6'2", 6'3", 78, 80-inch reaches to my 67-inch reach at 5'9".
And it's just interesting to see like all these things that I never would have a couple years ago, I never would have guessed how much goes into that. Like how much, just to be able to fight at the weight class you want, like that is almost a requirement of you need to be financially set to be able to even like make that happen, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
No, it is actually. I'm just going to pull up a picture of you just to show that whole weight class thing.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I'll show you a picture of my last fight where I did decide to go up to 155. It was coming back from it was a catastrophic neck injury.
Yeah.
I came back a little sooner than I should have. Really, at the end of the day, I probably shouldn't have fought the last two fights I did. But it was also a main event opportunity. And I looked at things, and me being the kind of guy I was, I like to be the first to do things if I can. I was going to be the first guy from Grand Prairie to main event a card outside of Grand Prairie. So I was like, heck yes, sign me up, please. And, you know, we'd done our research, and the matchup seemed like it was. Bill wasn't okay with the matchup, but we kind of convinced him it was going to be, because we went off the fact that he's hit and miss. He doesn't fight a whole lot. Like, his last time he fought was like 8 years ago. We just didn't tell you that you necessarily is training in the gym 3 times, 4 times a day, and he basically just lives in the gym. That's all he does. Granted, I didn't even know that either. That part I didn't know. So we go through that, but yeah, here's a picture of it. You can kind of see. That's the weigh-ins. You see how soft I am compared to him.
Yeah,
because I'm trying to hold weight on
4 inches on you there.
Oh, at least, and had at least 10 inches of reach on me.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
maybe I'll have to throw that picture up when I post the episode, so people can see that one.
That's why we have weight classes. People.
That's why you have weight classes. But when you, no worries. That's what I was thinking. Is it running now? Beautiful. Well, I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you for putting up with my fucking dog licking your ear off and biting your fingers the whole time. Second of all, another huge thanks for the jiu-jitsu lessons. I've been enjoying it immensely. Third, if people want to maybe try some private jiu-jitsu lessons with you, not just jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, boxing, you can train it all. If anybody wants to do any sort of martial arts training, they're in the Grand Prairie area, Champion Gym, ask for Randy. You can do pretty much anything you want, and what I love about it is it's low stress. You'll make it whatever they want it. If you want to take it seriously, if you want to put more into it, but if you just want to have some fun and learn a couple things, it's great. It's low pressure. It's a great environment. I really love the gym. Love the guys that run it. They really care about the people, and it's very apparent. It's not just some money making cardio kickboxing mill that's just trying to.
You look at the owner of our gym. The man. He pours everything back into that gym. He doesn't even own his own house. He drives a beat up vehicle. He's not driving around these brand new $100,000 vehicles, living in the nice new neighborhoods like lots are. Yeah. He pours everything back into it. Exactly. And it shows with the coaches that he has.
It shows it, and it shows at each level, and you can see that it filters down. And just like that young guy that was helping when I was at
exactly,
it shows, and I love it.
We're building a community is what we're trying to do.
Exactly, and how you guys have handled all the COVID stuff, Raf, the way like the videos he put out and the stance that they took, and for mental health and that, like even before I even came
back.
The
biggest thing, buddy. Mental health.
I was so supportive. Like when I was watching those videos a couple months back before I even come back to the gym, just watching Raf do that. I just, almost sitting in my office, giving the fist pump, just like, because more people, more businesses need to stand up like that. Yep. I think exactly what you just said, that everything you just laid out, I think that shows in spades. That's everything I've experienced, and I think everybody needs to go try it out.
And I think truly too, like not to cause like uprise or convince people to go and do anything, but if you are on the fence or you decide you want to stand your ground, guys, stand your ground. Yeah. Just say no. Doesn't mean you have to pull your phone out and be a dick and start swearing and screaming and name calling and all that crap, because you just look like an idiot when you do that. And now even myself, I want to support people that want their freedom, but I can't support somebody like that because you just look like an idiot. Yeah. You're the type that if this stuff got violent, you'd be the type that would tuck your tail and run. Yeah. Where it's those of us that are, no, we're looking at you going, no. Yeah. Just no. Go about your life. I'll go about my life, and we can get along perfectly fine. Just respect each other. Yeah. The second you don't respect me, well, we got some issues here. And depending on the level of disrespect is going to depend on the issue. Like, I'll openly admit it. I've had people come up and scream at me about masks, and I've looked them right in the face and go, you got about 2 seconds before you find out how much your mask protects you. Just walk away. Yeah, I'm going to walk away too. I don't want any problems. I'm minding my business. Yeah. Just mind you're the one coming into my space anyways. Yeah. And
people, that entitlement.
You have the protection on, so why are you scared of me? Yeah. It should be the other way around, but I don't know. I'm just the fighter. What can I say? Yeah,
but hey, you know a lot. You have a lot to pass on. There's a lot of wisdom in there, and thank you for coming and giving me your time. That means a lot to me. There's a lot of other things you could be doing with your day on this Wednesday, and I'm glad you'd spend it with me. So thanks for coming by, Randy.
Anytime, buddy. And anytime you want to talk again, bring me back. I'll do it again.
Well, if you don't break my microphone, maybe we will.
Bad with that. I'm clumsy.
Hey, me too. I do it all the time. All right, talk to you soon, brother.
Have a good one, buddy.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode with, us goofballs. Apologies for the dog jumping all over the place and causing a ruckus all the way through that episode. She was just really excited to see Randy and just didn't want to let anything go by the wayside. Any fingers she could bite, any toes she could bite, she was all over it. So apologies on that. Also, if you enjoyed the episode, like I said in the intro, if you could pass it on to a friend, say, hey, you might enjoy this. This is my friend Nick's podcast, and this episode might tickle you. Pass it on their way. If you are interested in maybe training and you're around the Grand Prairie area, Champion Gym where Randy trains out of there, they do an amazing job. They really run it right. Respect is the number one thing, and you can see it trickle down from the very top right down to the kids classes. You can see that respect is paramount there, and I really enjoy it. It's fun to go in there and be around people that have that type of mindset and to be taught in a place that kind of holds respect on that type of pillar. It just makes it really easy where you can kind of knowing that you can go in there and you can fit in right away, because as long as you come in with respect, being held very highly, that's exactly what they want to see, and they kind of welcome you in. So I've been really enjoying that. Specifically, if you hear from Randy and you think maybe he's a type of guy that would maybe you'd want to do some classes with, some privates with, please go in and ask for him. He's a great guy. I've been really enjoying working with him. He is very outgoing and makes you feel comfortable. And, it doesn't matter if it's a question of, when we're trained jiu-jitsu, if I have a question about striking, he's done it all, and he can kind of show me that our strictly jiu-jitsu classes do not end there. We talk about fights, we talk about things upcoming. We really go all over the gamut, and it's really nice to have a guy like Randy where his skill sets is so variable, and he can really kind of step into any different role and kind of give you, maybe if it's not the exact specifics, he can at least give you a ballpark idea of kind of what you're asking about, and he can definitely put you in touch with somebody that could answer those questions even better if you needed. But really, to get you started and get your foot in the door, couldn't recommend Champion Jim or Randy enough. They are awesome guys, and they really do it right. And I've been just enjoying my little journey into jiu-jitsu more than I could probably even fit in these intros and outros, because it's such a depth of a conversation that would need to be had to really explain it to you guys. So I've been enjoying it. If you want to enjoy it too, stop on by. I'll link Randy's Instagram in the description. You can always send him a message too if you just have any questions before you jumped in, that they can help you out as well. So other than that, have a great week. Tell somebody you love them, and spread some laughter. All right, see you guys. 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 See you guys.